Okay.
Okay.
Okay, we're recording.
Okay, perfect. So let's go ahead and get going. So I'll call the meeting to order. Morgan, would you mind doing roll call?
Absolutely. Commissioner Lyons.
Here.
Commissioner Clements.
Present.
Commissioner Tunnel.
Here.
Commissioner Broyles. Commissioner Thompson.
Here.
Commissioner Cron.
Present.
And Commissioner Faraday.
Present.
Let's check for Mr. Scott Broyles one more time in case he was having trouble with the mute. All right, let the record show that Commissioner Broyles is absent.
Okay, thank you. So first item on our agenda, as always, is to review and approve minutes. And this time we have minutes from January 5th, which was our last regular meeting, and January 19th, which was a special meeting, sort of all things P&Z. So I believe the January 5th minutes just got sent. They weren't in the packet. Rachel just sent them via email. So if you have been able to sort of go over those real quick, we can approve. If anyone would like to scoot that to the next meeting, however, we can do that to allow time to review.
This is Commissioner Tunnel. I would recommend I'd like to suggest that we move it to the next meeting.
Okay. Yeah, it was just sent, so that would give us a little more time to make sure we are able to review those. So unless there's any.
That's a motion.
Okay. Thank you.
This is Commissioner Clements. I second Scott's motion.
Okay.
To move it to next meeting.
So it has been moved and seconded to push the January 5th minutes to our March agenda for approval to allow appropriate time for review. All in favor of that motion?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, we will go ahead. So then can I get another motion for the January 19th minutes, please?
Sure. This is Commissioner Clements. I move we approve the minutes from our January 19th special meeting.
I'll second.
This is Commissioner Tunnel. I'll second that.
Okay. It has been moved and seconded to approve minutes from our January 19th special meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, on to pre-applications. We have one at 400 Cron Lane, Vince Spear for Idaho Properties LLC. If you would like to present that item, we are ready for you.
Okie dokie. Can I take my mask off so it's easier to hear me? Is that all right?
Well, you're supposed to keep it on in the
Okay.
room.
All righty.
They can hear you because we did a test.
Oh,
Like
okay.
the sound is really good.
All righty. We are just wanting to build some storage facility on that land, and being that there's no water and sewer to the down Cron Lane yet, that's about the only thing that is possible to do. There is an existing home that we've rented for worker housing on the property, and we intend to keep that. And then also we've had discussions with Morgan regarding building some more worker housing on the front of the property. You can see the blue in the plan is the existing home that we've refurbished and is full of people now living there. And then the front area we'd like to keep to possibly build 2 more sixplexes in the future. So I believe that it's zoned for mixed use, and it's a conditional approval for the storage units, but that is what we'd like to pursue if we can get some sort of approval from you guys so we can start getting a final design and some of those sort of things done.
So this is Morgan, and I'll just chip in that I'm just really reiterating what the applicant said, which is this is zone community commercial. It is on Cron Lane. The proposal is for self-storage facility. That's the orange, yellow, and red structures in this site plan. The blue is an existing building, which they're using as a residence. The only thing that I would mention is that in our recent code update that just became effective like 2 weeks ago, it said that any more than one drive access to a parcel needs special approval. And so this site plan is showing 2. So that's something that we would need to look at and see if it was warranted to have 2 access points on Cron, or to see if the design could be reworked.
Morgan, I know it currently has 2. Would it be grandfathered in because there's already 2 there?
I'm not sure. I'd have to look at it a little bit more in depth and see what those 2 were, if they were the same. Because he'd be bringing the whole parcel up, and
360 square feet on each floor.
is someone talking?
So, can you hear me? Hello?
May I ask who's speaking?
Oh, I'm just calling in. I guess I need to mute my microphone. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay. Morgan, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, that was the only comment.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do you have any comments or suggestions at this point? Questions? As this is a pre-application, give them a chance to have a little time before they submit a final.
This is Commissioner Cron. I had a couple of questions. Are you going to be doing any type of fencing for security reasons, lighting? Are you running electrical to any of your units?
We would, the perimeter will be the buildings itself.
Mm-hmm.
And there would be fencing on the northeast and the northwest corner. We will have a security system. I'm not sure that we'll have lights that are on all the time, but the individual units will have a motion light. So when somebody enters, their light will turn on. So there would be, it's very simple electrical. So just every unit's got a motion light inside there. And I know that there was an issue with another storage facility recently that had some problems, but I think that having residents on site would deter, if the security is being monitored by me and I can say, hey, there's somebody messing around in this unit, I don't think it's supposed to be there. Can you go see what it is? So one of the workers that would be living there would be one that we could call on to check things out and do that sort of thing. Does that answer your question? Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm sorry, this is Morgan again. I just wanted to add one other comment that I thought of that I forgot to mention earlier. Is this obviously looks like a lot of impervious area with the parking and all the buildings. And just to make sure you're aware of where your stormwater is going, because I don't necessarily see that in this preliminary plan, although I realize it is very preliminary.
I have had a conversation with, and I forget the town engineer's name, and he and the engineer from CSATch Engineering are already working on figuring out a solution. So those guys worked together a lot in the past, and they seem to have a meeting of the minds about how to make that all make sense. So
Okay.
The preliminary conversations were very good, and he seemed to think that there was, and I know that he might be replaced soon, but at least so far we've had good conversations about how to make sure that happens.
Okay, thank you.
other questions or comments from commissioners? Okay, we will go ahead and move on. Thank you so much.
Okay. So what do you send, do you give a sort of a nod of the head, or is it, if there's no objections, we can start to spend money on the engineering and that sort of stuff, or how does it work from here?
It's really more like you take any comments or concerns that the commission expresses and make sure that you address them in your full application.
Okay.
You know, so making sure you put details in there about the fencing and the lighting and anything else that they asked about.
Okay, so as far as the zoning is concerned, it's not something we're beating up, it's zoned enough, the zoning is right that we can move forward to get with the full application. Is that correct?
So it's an allowed use with a conditional use permit. There are 12 criteria for conditional use permits, and they revolve around not creating, you know, pollution, whether that be light, noise, fumes, etc. Changing the neighborhood character, mostly revolving around whether this is appropriate for that location, that character.
Okay.
And so when the commission looks at your full application, you'd want to make sure that you're clearly stating how you're meeting those 12 criteria. And they're all
Okey-doke.
listed in the CUP information packet.
All righty, that sounds great.
You're good.
Thank you.
Check.
It's right next to the house we approved.
Hmm?
How close is this to that house that we approved?
It's down the road, quarter mile.
So
Okay.
this is the house that we approved, just since I can hear your
Okay.
question.
Yeah.
And it's 3 parcels to the east, right here,
And there's metal buildings and stuff, right? on
large
the
parcels.
East
Is that
boundary.
the lot that you had,
Yeah.
you were listing? Okay, yeah.
You got metal buildings on the east side for
Right down that road.
the shops over there for various
Yeah.
contractors and stuff, right? Yeah, you can see the 3 shops there all rented to different contractors. Then you got the landscaping business on the west side.
Yeah, High Mountain.
Yeah, and then High Mountain's using across the street too. They're doing some more stuff across the street on that for extra storage. And you got Kelly's stuff over there with those big oxen things or whatever they are.
Yeah.
Muskox. Yaks.
Okay. Let's go ahead and go to new business. So first up, we have
I forgot your name.
On it.
PUD 2001,
Thank you.
subdivision
Thanks,
2004, design review 2049, scenic route 2013, and development agreement at TBD Forest Street. And we likely have Mr. Milliman or Ms. Pemberton to present.
Yes, Steve Milliman.
Welcome. You are welcome to sort of tell us about this project. I know we've seen a pre-app review recently, but you can give us an overview and that would be great.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chairman, members of the commission. Steve Milliman representing the applicant on this subdivision PUD application. The other critical members of the team that are, I believe, online tonight as well, not sitting with me, but elsewhere, are the owners, Chad Harding and John Thurnagel, Scott Acker, who has done the engineering on the project, Matt Anthony of Alpine Design Solutions, who has done the architectural and land planning work, and Sasha Childs, who has kept the train on the track and done everything else that's needed to move it forward. The applications that are before you are for subdivision preliminary plat, for planned unit development preliminary development plan, for design review, and for scenic route review, and for approval of a development agreement. I'll just take a minute to review those as far as how they fit into the overall process here. You're very familiar with subdivision preliminary plat applications and how they work, and the fact that if the preliminary plat is approved, then at some point the owners come back through with a final plat to demonstrate conformity with the preliminary plat, and thereby become entitled to actually sell parcels in the project. The PUD, preliminary development plan, is subject to your recommendation to the council and will receive a second public hearing from the city council. The principal function of the PUD is to allow for the clustered development approach, or what I would call footprint lot approach, which is becoming increasingly popular, but which involves some alleviations from the traditional code requirements for more traditional lots. And that's the principal reason you see the PUD in this mix. Contrary to what at least one of the persons who wrote a letter suggested, the PUD does not increase the density of this project or allow for the increase of the density. The project falls within the current R4 zoning, does not seek any zone change, nor does it need any zone change. The design review is being requested because the applicants here will be actually constructing the units. There are 2 home styles, and they will be constructing and selling those. The scenic route review is obviously because the project is on West Lake Street, and the development agreement, which will also receive a second public hearing from the city council, is to memorialize and bind to the property the commitments being made by the development, particularly as to improvements and financial assurances. There will be more detail added to that development agreement as we move forward to the council and we have engineering estimates for the specific improvements, but the template and the overall structure is before you. So you will see, should you choose to allow us to proceed here, you will see a final plat come back across your table, and you will see a final PUD plan come back across your table. The others will be concluded either through your action tonight or by the city council. So the project, well, I guess first the property. The property is 3.3 acres located just south of West Lake Street. Its northern boundary is the West Lake Street right-of-way. East of property owned by Gabriella Hess, on which Ruby's Kitchen is located. And then to the east of this property and to the south of this property are residential parcels, also zoned R4. And then, of course, a small portion of West Forest Street, which is the point of ingress and egress for this subdivision. The R4 zone has been in place on these properties for quite some time. And again, one of the letters continued to refer to this as a high density project. In fact, this project is R4 compliant, which would not, in my vernacular, be considered high density. It is a density allowed by the zone itself. The project involves a total of 13 homes, detached residential dwellings, 12 of which will be newly constructed, and the 13 of which is an existing home which will be remodeled and which will be a local housing unit and will be deed restricted as provided by the city policy on local housing units. That is not a requirement of the code, but is a decision that John and Chad made, recognizing the need in McCall for as many local housing units as can be created. And that is the B6 unit that Morgan is pointing to right there on your screen. It is an existing home. It'll be moved there and remodeled. The other 12 units consist of 2 different designs for 2-story homes that have been designed by Matt, and that he will go through in some detail with you as far as the specific design features. The homes range in size from 2,000 to 2,500 square feet. They range from 3 to 4 bedrooms. They all have 2nd-story living spaces. The maximum height is just over 28 feet, so they're well within the height restriction. What makes the platting a little bit different than some more traditional subdivisions, but I would say not unusual anymore today, is that the lots themselves are what I would call footprint plus lots. The lots are essentially the footprint of the building plus a small area around the footprint of the building. And everything else outside of that is platted common area and is under the control of the property owners association, including all landscaping, which helps to provide a higher level of both consistency and maintenance for things like landscaping and common area features. Of course, the owners will have some easements around their buildings to make sure they have room for maintenance of the buildings. And then the driveways that come off of the internal drive, we actually are platting as what's called exclusive common area or exclusive use common area, meaning they will be maintained by the association, but they are for the exclusive use of the homeowner that is served by that driveway. As I said, Chad and John will build these. There are two styles that Matt will go through, and they will sell them as finished homes. The project has a number of amenities associated with it. The two most significant of which I believe are the dedicated public pathway, and we'll start with that. Running along the northern boundary of the property, and then, yeah, thank you, Morgan. And running, so a detached pedestrian pathway, detached from West Lake Street, and then turning to go south along the eastern boundary and making its way out to West Forest Street. This will be a pedestrian pathway that will be constructed by the applicants and dedicated to the public, dedicated to the city for public use. The pathway will connect the corner of Mather Road and West Lake Street with West Forest Street. And West Forest Street is the designated pathway under the city's pathways plan, bike plan, and pathways map. West Forest Street is the designated street for such pathways. So the concept here is that this pathway provides a safe means to get from the corner of Mather Road and West Lake Street and an attractive way to get around and to West Forest Street. The second amenity that's associated with the pathway is that there will be what we are calling neighborhood art panels that will be placed periodically along the pathway, featuring metal overlays of horses. Morgan has just pointed to an example. Thank you, Morgan. With a Native American emphasis, and so those will be placed along the pathway to add some additional aesthetics to it. A third amenity for the project is the extent of the open space. The code would require at least 10% open space. This project has over 50% open space. And then the fourth amenity is in fact the local housing unit itself, which is not required but is being provided by the applicants as one of the amenities in the PUD. Lot coverage, overall lot coverage for the project is about 30% less than what would be allowed under your code. So you have the nice combination of about 5 times the amount of open space required by your code and about a third less of lot coverage than is allowed by your code. The internal road is a private road which will be maintained by the association. and provides ingress and egress from, excuse me 1 minute, from West Forest Street. Also consistent with the city's transportation plan, which specifically disfavors, in this case, ingress and egress also off of West Lake Street. So that will be a private road and will be maintained by the association. Parking, and Morgan, if we can go back to the site plan that you had up there. Yeah, thank you. So your code requires at least 2 parking spaces for each home. This plan provides considerably more than that. To start with, each of the units will have a 2-car garage, except B6 unit. That satisfies the parking requirement. But in addition, the driveways, which you can see cross-hatched on this plan, are dedicated for the exclusive use of the unit owner and allow for at least 2 more parking spaces, and in some cases 3 or more. And then there is additional common parking, 9 additional common parking spaces that are designated on the west side and down where Morgan is pointing right now to provide an additional 9 parking spaces. So the parking provided is considerably in excess of that which is required. Let's see, what else have we not covered here? So we conducted a neighborhood meeting, a virtual neighborhood meeting, which was very well attended, and heard a lot of concerns from neighbors about existing parking, which was attributed to overflow parking from Rotary Park and to some extent from Ruby's Kitchen on Mather and West Forest. That was problematic for some of the folks who were providing input. There were concerns about additional traffic on West Forest Street. And there were concerns about the allowance of short-term vacation rentals, both from a point of view of impact on the surrounding neighborhood and traffic and parking, actually. The initial plan for this project and the plan going into the neighborhood meeting was to allow for short-term vacation rentals with some regulation by the Homeowners Association. After the neighborhood meeting, Chad and John decided to change course on that, and the draft covenants and restrictions, covenants, declarations, and restrictions, which have been submitted as part of this application, in fact, prohibit any rentals for less than 30 days. So short-term rentals have been prohibited in this project. That has a number of effects that we feel address some of the concerns expressed by some of the neighbors. Certainly traffic will be considerably reduced if these units are not used as short-term rentals, and the higher volume of use that those produce. The same with parking. By reducing the volume of users in the subdivision, we reduce the parking, but we also have in the covenants a prohibition on any parking off property. And granted, that may not always be easy to enforce, but it's there to at least try to address some of the neighbors' concerns about parking on West Forest Street and Mather Road. So the covenants require owners and guests to park inside the property and not on West Lake Street or on Forest Street or on Mather Road. And then the third I think positive impact of the prohibition of short-term rentals is just addressing concern from neighbors that the short-term rentals have a negative effect on the quiet enjoyment of properties in the area. And we've all heard a lot about short-term rentals and the problems associated with them over the last few years. So the covenants have eliminated them as an issue in this project. And I apologize, we didn't get a letter back out to the neighbors, so I know Ms. Follett was probably not aware that that change had been made when she wrote her letter, but it has in fact been made. We have reviewed all of the proposed conditions of approval. We have no objections to any of them, except condition number 3 in the subdivision and PUD findings. And I raised a concern with Morgan that did not appear to allow the owners the alternative of financially assuring some of the city-controlled infrastructure, not including sewer, which is Payette Lake Sewer District controlled, of being able to financially assure those as opposed to completing them all before the first building permit is obtained. And Morgan has agreed to a rewording of that condition number 3 in the PUD and the subdivision, which does acknowledge the ability to use financial assurances if appropriate. We're not at all sure that will be needed here, but if it is, then there would be a mechanism for that. And again, that in part is the function of the development agreement, is if that is going to be envisioned, then the specific amounts required and the method of financially assuring is required. And that all goes into the development agreement, which itself, under the language we proposed, would have to be approved and recorded prior to any building permit. So there's no question that the property has been imprinted with the developer's commitments prior to any issuance of any building permit. Let me just look and see if there's anything else. I think that's substantially everything that I had hoped to cover. What I'd like to do is turn it over to Matt Anthony to talk about the design features, and then I'll return to wrap up our part of the presentation and certainly try to address any questions. If there are any questions at this point, I'd be happy to address them before Matt presents the design features.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, can you please state your name and address for the record?
Yeah, this is Matt Anthony with Alpine Design Solutions here in McCall. 1093 is my address. So Steve did a pretty good job explaining the site planning and all the amenities we're providing. So if you the sheet that's up in front of you kind of gives a good idea with the vicinity map, and that the yellow outline of the property kind of gives you a good idea where you're at with in relation to Runway Park and Ruby's Kitchen. And then that lower picture is rendering from what it would look like from Lake Street. So you kind of see the closest building. The buildings are the A units are really probably between 40 and 50 feet from Lake Street, with the exception of Unit A1 is a little closer. So we're trying to push it as far away from Lake Street as we can to help preserve some of the trees and the natural landscaping in there, as well as get the detached bike path across there. So if you can go to that next sheet, Morgan. So here's just some site pictures. Kind of hard to see with the dark day we got our photos on, but it's pretty heavily forested. It has a slope up to Forest Street, but I guess that helps you kind of see what we're dealing with there. Yeah. This next one, really just as far as site planning concept, we're trying to keep this as natural as we can. So that's why the road coming off of Forest Street has a nice arc to it. There's a big natural rock outcropping there, right above Morgan's cursor that we're trying to save, and as well as wrap around some groups of trees to save as many as we possibly can. And then come in and end in the cul-de-sac that will be kind of tucked into the hill too, to help keep the buildings down a little bit. Pretty basic snow storage on the side, utility easements and things like that. So you go ahead and scroll down more here. So this one kind of helps show some of the trees. All those big circles you're looking at are the main huge trees that are on site there. As well as, I know it's hard to see with this full site plan, all the landscaping that we are planning on adding. But as you can see, the road kind of winds through some of the bigger trees that we're trying to save, as well as buildings. We've moved as much as we can around to save some big groupings of trees that are already existing. Yeah, these are just some more images of all the buildings together, just so you can kind of see how it'll feel together with the trees in between. Along Lake Street, there's a slight grade change from the front of buildings down. There's kind of a natural swale there we're using for stormwater too. But we'll place some boulders in there, trying to keep it as natural as possible. So the boulders will be placed not in a row, but in somewhat of a random pattern, and then replanted with natural grasses throughout, and then a few new trees as we can get in between the units to help break up their lines, as well as some privacy between the houses. And yeah, that bottom picture there is the B units. And that's what I'll get into next, is the specific designs of the two different types here. So go ahead and move up. So these A units are all the ones facing Lake Street. So this would be the facade that you'll see from Lake Street. Our materials are going to be a combination of wood, stone, and some metal. These are, I guess the term we're using is mountain modern or mountain contemporary. So, nice clean lines, some really nice beamwork up above for that roof, some taller, vaulted ceilings with some big windows. The window frames will be black. The roofing will be metal, but it'll be a dark black metal. Yeah, you can see that picture right there. It's a little dark, but you can kind of see the type of metal we're going to use, as well as that's a good example of the color of the wood siding we'll use. Yeah, just some different angles on the elevations, but yeah, with this site plan, Morgan, this is just kind of an enlarged view of I guess typical section of the development. You can kind of see, the actual property line is basically at the eave line of the building. So we'll provide, washed rock around the drip line and the eave line, and then the rest will be taken care of with the HOA and their landscaping maintenance. Try to save as many of the natural trees as we can, in this site plan. You can see kind of a little bit of that grade change out in front of the building between Lake Street and the building, with some boulders, and with some natural plantings and grass in between there. And again, as Steve mentioned, these buildings are pretty good size. These front units are 2,300 square feet, with oversized garage. So the garage will fit, 2 full-size SUVs, as well as the driveway being, 25 to 30 feet long, which is bigger than the average residence in a typical neighborhood here. So plenty of parking there. Yeah, here's just some images of the exterior of each side. We offset some of those stone columns to help break up the elevation. Again, that stone will be a nice, clean, crisp, dry stack stone. Everything, the beams will be stained a somewhat pretty dark color too. An example of a light fixture, as well as the siding in that picture is probably pretty close to what the color we'll be using as well. And then this is the B units, which on the site plan you'll notice are not on the lake side, they're on the other side. So the garage is basically flipped. Yeah, so that's those back units there. So as you pull into the garage, which is underneath a deck. So these actually have their driveways actually, and deceiving on the site plan, but the driveway is actually 10 feet longer than you can see. So the driveways are plenty long for plenty of parking, as well as oversized 2-car garage as well. Yeah, and so these ones, the living area, there's a nice entry on the bottom floor with 1 bedroom in these units, and then the main living is on the upper floor. Again, trying to keep that footprint as small as we can, but allow for a good sized garage for cars and toys that everyone brings with them when they come up here. Again, that's a good picture of some siding examples there on the lower left. That's kind of the color and the feel of the buildings that we're going for. The B units will have a little bit of stucco on the top level. Again, with a pretty darker brown or a brownish gray, complemented with some black window frames and trim, and the darker metal as well. The hand railing on the front, basically gonna be a black steel railing with cable railing. Overall height is about 28 feet. These are lower sloped roofs to help with that, the height of them. So obviously hold snow, so we won't be shedding snow onto adjacent properties. I think that's about it. If you have any questions on the design portion of these, I'll hand it back to Steve.
Okay, thanks, Matt. So the approvals that we're seeking this evening would be approval of the preliminary plat for the subdivision, recommendation of approval of the preliminary development plan for the PUD, approval of the design review and the scenic route, and recommendation of approval of the development agreement subject to the city council finally approving all of the dollar figures and manner of financial assurance. We would certainly be happy to address any questions that the commission might have at this point, either myself or any of the other members of the team that are on the phone. If not, then we'll let Fallon proceed with the public comment portion and be back for rebuttal if we need to.
Steve, this is Commissioner Lyons. I do have one question. You have the pathway continuing on through in front of Ruby's kitchen. Is that something that she's already agreed to? Because that seems like right where she has that retaining wall planter thing.
Yeah, that is something that Gabriella has agreed to, and it'll require that be reoriented, Commissioner Lyons.
Okay.
We felt it was important that it actually extend all the way to Mather so that people at that corner can get onto it and off of it.
Yeah, obviously.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is the pathway paved or is it gravel?
It is paved.
Okay.
It'll be constructed, finished, and then dedicated to the city. The parks, and as Morgan pointed out in her staff report, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee reviewed that proposal and recommended your acceptance of it as an improvement in lieu of a park per se. The cost of that, by the way, is about 50% greater than would be the cost of actually satisfying the literal requirement in your ordinance for a parks dedication, and much more meaningful. One of the things I did not mention is that as you come down the east boundary of the property on the pedestrian pathway, and if Morgan, if you could pop back to the site plan.
I was going to bring up,
Yeah.
is this what you were getting at, Steve?
Yeah, that's actually even better if we can get to the city GIS map. So as you come down that pathway along the eastern side of the property, you actually adjoin that alleyway, which runs essentially all the way to Albertsons, and not all of which is improved. But one of the comments that was made early on by Nathan Stewart was that the advantage of that pathway is not only does it get people to Forest, which is the currently designated pedestrian and bike pathway for the city, but it provides the opportunity in the future that if that alleyway were ever improved as a pedestrian pathway, you would also have connection with that. Thanks, Morgan.
Any other questions for Steve at this point before we have Morgan give her staff report? Okay, Morgan, if you want to go ahead.
All right, thank you. I'll try to keep this brief because the applicant's representative did a very thorough job. As mentioned, this is 413. Let me just get the site plan. Detached single-family dwelling units, one of which down here in the bottom right corner will be deed restricted for local housing. The application as presented meets lot coverage, meets height, meets setback, meets parking. They were not required to do a PUD for the size of the subdivision, being less than 4 acres in the R4 low density residential zone. They did opt to do the PUD in addition so that they could have these smaller sort of footprint lots and then maintain everything else in open space, which gave them the space on the north side to really set all the structures back and have this pedestrian pathway. And same with on the south side where it connects to Forest. So some of the alleviations from the development code that they were requesting through the PUD process were the in lieu parks requirements. So rather than dedicating a portion of land, 0.36 acres to the city for a public park, they proposed an in lieu proposal of extending this pathway from the corner, which is across from the existing Rotary Park, around the parcel, adjacent to the other proposed future pathway in the alley that Steve just mentioned, and then down to Forest, which is an existing identified pedestrian route. And that in lieu parks requirement was recommended for approval by the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee. The second is that per code, each unit should have a minimum of 100 square feet of private landscaped open space. While these small footprint lots do not show 100 square feet of private dedicated open space per unit, there is well in excess of 100 square feet per unit in open space in this plot or this plan. The third is that per code, the minimum right-of-way for a road is 60 feet. The applicant's proposing 50, so that is a reduction of 10 feet. However, this is a private road. It won't be maintained by the city. It'll be maintained by the HOA. And that's been a very common request and has been commonly approved. I think all the private roads that have come through on subdivision plats in the last 4 years have had reductions from 60 to 50 feet for their private right-of-ways. The other request is that an alleviation from the garage standards. You can see by the design here, for example, that the garage makes up more than 50% of the width of the front of the facade of these structures. And our code does give the commission the ability to waive those garage standards through design review. It doesn't necessarily have to be through a PD. You are allowed to waive that through design review, but I listed it here as another one of the development standards they were listing for alleviation from, if it's warranted with good design. And then the final one is that the minimum lot size in the R4 low density residential zone is 10,000 square feet per lot. And because they're asking for these footprint lots so they can maintain greater open space, they're proposing lots of approximately 2,000 square feet rather than 10. But the overall density is the same. So if you divided these all up into 10,000 square foot lots, they'd be allowed the same number of units. They would just be pressed a little bit further apart, and the open space would be a bit more segmented. And so that is actually the intended goal of a PUD application, is to allow clustering of units and then greater preservation of open space. So just wanted to point those out. The applicant went through the amenities. As Commissioner Lyons asked, these are paved pathways of 10 feet in width. They will connect from the corner of Westlake and Mather around to Forest. Another amenity would be their excess of open space. So code for PUD would require 10%. They are proposing approximately 50, so 5 times the amount of open space required by the PUD. They are also proposing to preserve as many trees as possible and to maintain a natural landscape. So it won't be heavily, artificially landscaped with Kentucky bluegrass lawns or things like that. They're trying to preserve sort of the intent of the natural landscaping that's currently there. They also talked about these decorative fence panels with horses representing the name of the development, Running Horse, PUD, and they are not continuous, so they're fence panels. It's not a full-length fence, so it should still allow movement of wildlife through the property and through the corridor, but it would break up and screen some of these structures. And in addition to that, they're talking about doing an area history display in this northeast corner. And one of the conditions is that, any history that they put on there be approved by the city and probably run by the Historic Preservation Commission. And then the deed restricted local housing unit. So those were all mentioned. Per the future land use plan, in the McCall Area Comprehensive Plan, it indicates the continued zoning of the subject property as either low density to medium density residential. Actually, it does identify it for medium density. So this is a lower density than the future land use plan identified it as. It showed it as possibly being upzoned to R8. The applicant's proposing to keep it at the current zoning of R4, low density residential, 4 units per acre. None of that's proposed to change. And that is in alignment with the sewer district overlay map. The sewer district density map that was recently approved maintained this at an R4 density rather than allowing it to go up to R8. So they should be allowed to get all their sewer hookups. And I can mention the sewer comments in a moment. It does provide 1 local housing unit, which would be well supported by the comp plan. They've also prohibited the use of short-term rentals for 30 days or less. They do allow the structures or the dwelling units to be rented for longer periods, which does provide the possibility that some of these may end up as year-round rentals. So let's see. We talked about open space. We talked about the lot size. There was a whole design guideline or a whole design review, draft findings that you could review to see how it was in alignment with the design guidelines, but it appears to have, natural colors, materials, mountain modern architecture, well landscaped structures. It appears to be in alignment with the design guidelines. The engineering comments, there was a thorough engineering review and good preliminary engineering plans provided, and the engineering comments stated that it is likely that these can all comply with our drainage management guidelines and other requirements. The sewer district stated that while this is currently a Category C basin, they're in the process of bringing it into a Category B basin, and then they would serve the proposed density of R4. Fire had comments just that a fire hydrant would be required. We talked about parks, recommending the parks plan for approval, as did the city arborist and parks and rec director. And so most of these different agencies' comments are all included in the conditions of approval. There are 26, and I will read through those briefly so that the commission is aware of the conditions as drafted. And there is only one minor change that I would be recommending from what you received, and that is to condition 3, as Mr. Milliman discussed. So I'll read through these and I'll read through number 3 as I propose it to be modified, because the way it was drafted was not in accordance with their development agreement. So number 1, all applications are contingent upon each other. So the applicant would have to get approval for the design review, the subdivision plat, the PUD, etc. 2, prior to issuance of a building permit or any site disturbance or earthwork, the applicant shall receive final engineering approval for all civil plans. 3, this is the one that I suggest the commission amend. So it currently states, prior to issuance of a building permit, water infrastructure shall be constructed and final acceptance provided, and interior roads shall be constructed in all but final paving and striping. And the recommendation would be that it be changed to, prior to issuance of building permit, the applicant either complete interior roads and water infrastructure or financially assure the completion of these improvements and obtain final approval of a development agreement which memorializes the terms and conditions of the final assurances and related obligations regarding completion of these improvements. And this just brings it in accordance with 2 of the other conditions that I had already proposed, number 19 and 22, about the development agreement. 4, prior to issuance of any building permit, the applicant shall provide proof of sewer connection permit from the district. No sewer hookups will be allowed and no sewer permits will be issued until the sewer main extension and all sewer improvements are completed and have been accepted by the district. Any person or party desiring to construct a sewer line extension must first submit an application for the extension and obtain written permission from the district board of directors. 5, sewage and water plans must be submitted to and approved by the Idaho Department of Environmental Quality prior to approval of plat. 6, prior to scheduling of the final plat or PUD for consideration by the Planning and Zoning Commission, and prior to any site work or disturbance, the applicant shall provide a tree protection and management plan by a third-party licensed arborist that fits the site and project. The plan should clearly identify significant trees that can be retained during construction and efforts necessary to ensure their survival throughout the construction process. 7, the park's proposal for a separated pedestrian pathway shall be modified to soften the 90-degree corner of the pathway in the final civil plans and shall include directional signage provided by the applicant where the pathway intersects Forest Street and Mather Street and at the eastern end of the property along West Lake Street where the pathway turns to the south and heads to Forest Street. The decorative fencing panels, if in excess of 4 feet, shall be set back at least 20 feet from the front property line. Upon submittal of the project PUD final plan, the applicant shall provide a detailed landscaping plan that identifies the plant size at the time of installation and location of irrigation throughout the project. 10, upon submittal of the PUD final plan, the applicant shall provide a lighting plan and photometric analysis that demonstrates that the site and exterior building lighting will comply with our outdoor lighting ordinance. 11, upon submittal of the PUD final plan, the applicant shall provide a snow storage plan that illustrates adequate snow storage areas for drive, parking, sidewalk, and pathway areas. 12, details of the proposed entrance sign shall be provided as part of the final plat and final PUD applications prior to review by the McCall Area P&Z Commission. 13, upon submittal of the PUD final plan, the applicant shall provide plans for the location of trash collection and trash enclosures as necessary. 14, per code, the private street shall be dedicated for public use, provided no public parking shall be allowed on or along the project's private drives. 15, prior to issuance of a C of O for any unit, the applicant shall install street name and other necessary signage for addressing purposes as determined by the McCall addressing coordinator. 16, the applicant shall underground any overhead utilities located along the property frontages. Additionally, all utilities within the project shall be installed underground, including any propane tanks. 17, prior to issuance of a C of O for any unit, the applicant shall either complete the landscaping pathways, roadways, undergrounding of overhead utilities and other project amenities, or shall obtain approval of a development agreement with the city and shall provide financial assurances for any deferred improvements. 18, prior to execution and recordation of the final plat, the applicant shall provide a maintenance reserve funding plan schedule for the private road for review and approval by the city engineer. 19, prior to execution and recordation of the final plat, the applicant shall construct water, sewer, road infrastructure, and shall obtain final approval of these aspects from the city of McCall and the sewer district. Alternatively, the applicant shall obtain approval of a development agreement with the city and shall provide financial assurances for any deferred improvements. 20, prior to execution and recordation of the final plat, all easements shall be indicated on the final plat and shall be formally documented with signed declarations and recorded with the plat. 21, prior to execution and recordation of the plat, the applicant shall provide digital files of the plat in accordance with the digital submission standards. 22, cost estimates of all deferred infrastructure will be required prior to scheduling of the application with City Council, and financial assurances in accordance with code will be provided prior to issuance of a building permit. 23, a full set of drawings of all improvements intended for public use and maintenance, including but not limited to water and sewer lines, and also including private and public streets, shall be furnished to the city within 60 days of completion of the construction. 24, any area history displays, if constructed, shall first be approved by the city. 25, pursuant to code, the applicant shall submit a final plat for the project not later than 18 months after the final approval of the preliminary plat, unless an extension of the time is applied for and granted by the commission, or unless otherwise allowed for with a phasing agreement. And 26, per code, within 18 months of approval of the PUD general plan, the applicant shall submit to the city a final plan for the entire PUD.
Okay. Commissioners, do you have any clarifying questions for Morgan before we open our public hearing?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Tunnel. I just had a question. I think you said all propane tanks would need to be buried. Is that correct?
Yes.
And is that something that is that's possible if every, I don't know how the homes are going to be heated, but is that something that would fit a situation where every single home was heated using propane, that they could fit with the fire code concerns by having each tank buried?
So I know that these are single family and not condos or townhomes, but in most cases like this with new developments, I'm gonna use AmeriGas for example, they would do like a large common tank and then meter off to each house individually. And it's preferred by the gas companies and it's required by code, city code, that new tanks be undergrounded.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions at the moment? Okay, we are going to go ahead and proceed with the public hearing. I'm assuming we've got a number of people who would like to comment on this application. So I want to just give you an overview of what this looks like, because I know that most of us don't spend our days attending planning and zoning meetings, especially virtually. So to give you sort of an idea of how this works, I will allow time for everyone who is here to speak, who would like to speak. I will go through, it's hard to do this virtually, but I'll allow time for anybody to step forward, I guess, is the best way to say it, by just kind of beginning to speak. Remember, we'd like your name and address for the record. Do also be aware that we have received public comment, written public comment. And I think some of you who have written in are also perhaps on the line. I just ask that you don't spend your time just repeating the same information that you wrote to us. We have reviewed that. We will take that into consideration, but just for the sake of everyone's of time, basically, to just not kind of go through everything you've already stated in a letter, because we have definitely received that and reviewed. And so we'll go through everyone who wants to speak on the public hearing. I will allow the applicant or any representative to respond to any questions or concerns that are brought up within the public hearing. And then we will close the public hearing. And after that, the commission will deliberate, and there is absolutely no outside discussion for the outside of the commission deliberating. So if you are a member of the public, you can listen in, but you aren't allowed to speak after we've closed the public hearing. So just so that is understood. Let's see here. So I will go ahead and open the public hearing, and I don't know if it would be easier how many people we have. Morgan, do you have any sense of how many people we have?
I don't have a great sense. I will start with the staff report. Did not have any public comments. I did not get any before the staff report went out. Everyone did receive 2 letters from me today, well in advance of the meeting, several hours before the meeting. So everyone's aware the commission had time to look at them. And one was from Michael and Tara Follett in opposition to the application, and another was from Jack Spiegelman in opposition to the application. So I just wanted to state on the record that those 2 letters have been received and reviewed by the commission, in case they are on here tonight, and that was going to affect their decision to speak.
Okay, perfect. So anyone who would like to speak on this project is welcome to do so. I will make sure that I allow plenty of time. I know that there's sometimes a delay if you are on a phone line as opposed to on the computer. It can take a few minutes to unmute yourself, or not a few minutes, but a little lag. So I'll try to make sure that we allow plenty of time. So. Is there anyone who would like to speak about this project?
Helen, this is Morgan again. Maybe I just missed it. Did you address the *6 to unmute yourself if you're on a phone?
I didn't say the *6. So if you are on a phone line as opposed to on a computer, you need to hit *6 to unmute yourself to speak, so that we can hear you. And sometimes there's a delay, so it might take, I don't know, 15 seconds even to be able to hear you. So just keep trying, and we'll be sure to not lose anybody. I do have a hand raised from David Gallipoli. Possibly?
Yes, hello.
Hi, would you like to comment?
Yes, please. Is there any environmental or community impact study required for this project, or a traffic study?
David, could you just state your name or your address for the record?
Yes, David Gallipoli, 200 Scott Street.
Thank you. And this time is not really a question answer, so we can kind of save those questions and then address them at the end, if that makes sense.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and then I have some, Jack Spiegelman, did you want to make some comments? No, okay. Anyone else? Jack Spiegelman, are you there? I'm seeing a hand raised, but I don't know if you're.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Hey, I just wanted to I sent you guys a letter the other day, and unfortunately, this is the second time that there's been a meeting that we were not notified. So we just got to find out, I think it was Thursday, that you were having this meeting. Unfortunately, I mean, we don't live there, and we don't have the opportunity to see all the other things or talk to our neighbors or anything. And because of COVID, we just can't get there. But I went through and I looked at what the purpose was of a planned unit development. And it says at the end, it is not intended to circumvent a conventional land use regulation. I strongly believe that this project is using the PUD concept to put as many houses as they can on Lake Street, and it is intended to circumvent normal land use conditions. When you put all the pictures up there that you had of the area, look at the size of the parcels. I realize that you could have the zoning, but it just is deeply concerning that if everybody on this street, on West 4th Street, is allowed to build this, that we're going to have a major problem in the future. And what I'm really asking is that the commissions or right now slow the process down and give us more time to ask the developers to give us a comprehensive plan, or the city, of what this would look like. Because as more houses become less valuable and more people decide that they want to build, 8, 10, 12, 14 units, and they want to do this, and they're going to put all their houses onto West 4th Street, that just because this project is first, and they're putting all these houses on there, this really is about circumventing this to put all the things on Lake Street. The other thing is this bike path thing that you've got here. I walk every day. You want to know where I live? I live at 325 and 327 Lake Street, right next to the park, directly across the street. Our homes will be the most impacted from this project as far as light pollution and everything, because we're gonna see everything. But let's just talk about this bike path for a second. The bike path really isn't going to be used by most people. When we get up and try to cross, we have to walk down to the park. We got to try to get across the highway, and we want to look at the river. We're not going to go through this and put ourselves back where it's not on the safe streets. I know it's something nice, but to have that be used to mitigate for all of this project, for them not to have open spaces, that means all those kids are going to go across the street. So not only are you going to impact our area and lights and traffic going on 4th Street with all of our walking, you're going to send all your people across the street to the park. And if this happens all the way up and down the quadrant from Mather Street to Gamble Street, then this is just the beginning of a request that you guys have a complete study, environmental impact, for what would happen if everybody was able to do the same project. And I don't know if that's how it's done, but that's why we really were hoping is that we could get an opportunity, since we just found about the meeting. I've tried to hire 3 or 4 attorneys. They seem to all have conflicts with Steve in town. And we need to get a professional to take a look at the project. I know Steve says he's got the parking, and I know that he says he's got open space. But right now, in order for this project to get approved, you're going to have to give them a map. And if you had the streets dedicated from the city, they would only be able to put 5 or 6 houses. And maybe they could be the same square footage. But that's why I'm saying this is to circumvent the traditional land use planning based on what all the other neighbors have. And once you let them do this, everybody else is going to do this. So all I would like is a continuance for us to have time to make more comments and hire a professional to go through all of the preliminary plans. I mean, we brought up about the parking. Well, once people put their boats, their skis, their everything in there, they're in their garages. Since there's no outside storage, no yards, anything, they're going to end up parking outside on the driveways. And they're not going to be able to get in and out of the garage unless somebody has to move a car and they don't have, another person has to move a car. So what's going to happen is people are just going to go park somewhere else. And so this really isn't alleviating all the problems. I could go on, but what I'm really asking for is that they delay this to let us get a professional to go through and look at this and help us with it, because we just haven't had time. We're in the middle of COVID. We can't even be there and talk to our neighbors and put something coordinated together. And that's really what we're asking for, is more time to look at this.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else who would like to comment on this project? And again, if you are on the phone and you need to unmute, it is *6.
Hi, this is Janice McNabb. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm at 310 Forest Street, and you know, in regards to this, I'm not opposed to the development. It's inevitable. I know that, you know, McCall is growing very fast. My concerns are kind of twofold. One is, and I know it was brought up, the density, even though it's the R4 zoning, it's not conforming to the normal existing housing around there. And then the other thing that I'm a little concerned is the only entrance and exit is on Forest Street. So Forest Street, as you guys know and you have designated, is the bike route, the walking path. It's the bus route too. It's a very busy street. If you didn't group all of these lots into a planned unit development, you would still have driveways, entrance and exits onto Lake Street. I reviewed all the city ordinances. I couldn't see, even in the scenic byway, where there was restrictions against having another entrance or exit on Lake Street. And then if there is, I overlooked it or didn't quite understand it, I then question, how does Whitetail get away with that down by Lardo's? So basically two concerns is the density and then the only entrance and exits onto Lake Street or onto Forest Street, which is going to create a lot of traffic in an area that's already very busy and traveled and not very well situated for bikes and walking paths.
Okay, thank you for your comments. I have a hand raised from Scott Spiegelman.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I live at 327 West Lake Street and 325 West Lake Street across the street. My brother Jack had sent a letter on our behalf, so I'm not going to cover any of that information. I think it covers the numerous concerns that we have, and we hope that they're all considered by the planning department and that you reject at this time moving forward with this until we do have time to get professional representation to adequately oppose some of the development issues. We are for responsible development. We know that this property is going to be developed, but I did want to just address a couple of other concerns and things I heard today or didn't hear. I know there's 9 additional parking spaces on this property, and they're proposing 13 houses. So is it likely that that's less than 1 guest per house? And I don't know the length of the garages. They talked about, you know, they're big garages, but are they 20 feet long, 25 feet long, you know, for boat trailers, for snowmobiles, for recreational vehicles, razors, people may have put in there. And since there are no yards, they're called postage stamp lots. I think there's 0 lot line lots is really would have been another word for it. There is no yards. They're just their houses put in there. There's going to have the concrete. Said that you're going to remove as little trees as possible. I'd like to get a number of trees that are going to be on the lot and how many will be removed and how many will remain. I think that there's a lot of specifics here, and I think we should be able to get a specific number on that. The Rotary Park impact and just an environmental impact report overall in the neighborhood. I don't know what has been done with that, with a development like this. It would seem that would be very important to have that environmental impact report, to know what the current impact is going to be and future impact between this development and future developments if they are developed on and around the neighborhood. We live next to Rotary Park. We've seen a tremendous increase in use of the park. And now with the swimming lanes out there, it's doubled the capacity of people, but there's been no additional parking. because people now that were just hanging out on the beach now hang out on the swim lane docks. We see boats come into the swim lane docks and drop people off, and they pick people up. They're there. So with all of these houses that are built right here across from the park and across from the lake, if those people want to enjoy Payette Lake, they're going to walk across the street to the park, and they're going to go take their boat and put it in at the marina, drive over here, and they're going to probably be swimming out to the lake and bringing all, picking up their friends there. Where are they all going to park? They're going to park. Right now, there's already a parking issue from overflow at Ruby's, from overflow from Shore Lodge. There isn't enough parking in the neighborhood. It's very dangerous walking across the highway as it is right now. When I'm there with my grandchildren and our families, we walk our dogs from the park across the across the crosswalk by the river. And you have to step out in front of people before they will even consider stopping there. So I think that you need to look at putting a light in there, or putting in some type of a thing that probably should be at the expense of the development. So it should not be something that the rest of the neighborhood should have to cover the cost on. But I just want you to take a look at these things in addition to what my brother has put together in the letter, and please give us some time and consider all of the issues before you approve the project as is. We think that there are some changes that could make it better and more responsible. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak on this project? Anyone else on the phone would like to speak? *6 to unmute. Sounds like we're getting somebody's audio. If you are, could everyone check their mute if you're not speaking, to just put your mute back on? Thank you. Okay, it doesn't sound like I'm not getting anybody else popping up that wants to make a comment. So I would like to hand this back to Mr. Milliman and any other representative who would like to address some of the concerns that were raised.
Okay, thank you, Fallon. This is Steve Milliman. I do want to address a few of the comments that were made. As far as notice, both the Spiegelmans through the trust were notified in accordance with city code and state code at the addresses indicated by the county assessor. In addition, they both attended, or I know at least Jack attended, the neighborhood meeting on December 15 when we presented this application and indicated when we were going to file it and when it was going to be heard by the Planning and Zoning Commission. That was nearly 2 months ago. So the suggestion that there hasn't been time to evaluate the application is somewhat disingenuous. I noted with interest in Jack Spiegelman's letter the statement that we have not seen what was presented to the city. So it does not appear to me that there has been any diligent effort made to even review the considerable materials presented by the applicants, both engineering, design, legal, and otherwise. So I don't think the request for additional time is well placed. I also would note that the PUD application goes on to the city council for a second public hearing. So there will certainly be more opportunity to comment if they desire to. As to trees, these are the numbers that are in the narrative, and Sasha and Matt, correct me if I'm off here, but it appears there are approximately 266 trees on the property. It is estimated that about 140 of them will be removed, leaving 126 trees, and that somewhere in the range of 55 to 60 new trees will be planted, leaving a total of about 186 trees on the property. That was in the application, it was specified, and it is further indicated in some of the plans submitted by Matt. As to parking, Matt emphasized how large these garages are, and the driveways are again as deep as the garages. And so before you even get to the 9 additional parking spaces, you have a minimum of 4 large parking spaces for each unit, in some cases 5. Considerably more than the city code deems necessary for a single family residential use. The concern expressed about density, I just want to emphasize what Morgan reported, which is this density is that which is allowed by the R4 zone, which is actually a lower density than is indicated as the likely density in the city's future land use map. As Morgan indicated, the same number of units could be placed on this property using traditional lots that would meet the city requirements. The PUD is not increasing the density. The same thing could be done through traditional lots. What you would lose in that process would be the extent of open space that we get from the use of smaller lots and the maximization of dedicated open space that's under the control of the association. It doesn't change the number of units. It does allow for much, much more open space and related amenities. The fact that 4th Street is the only access is consistent with the city's transportation plan. The only further alternative would have been to try to get an access out to Mather. And frankly, given everything we heard from the neighbors about parking and traffic, that wouldn't have frankly been any particular advantage. Traffic will go both ways on Forest, not just towards town. It will also go out to Mather Road and Westlake Street. But the ingress and egress is consistent with the city's master plan. The notion of getting professional reviews, again, it's been almost 2 months since we presented this project to the neighbors and told them exactly what we were going to do and when we were going to file it. And the only change in the project is we eliminated short-term rentals to try to address some of the concerns expressed by the neighbors about them. And then there were some other minor adjustments in response to the neighborhood meeting. But it's noteworthy that this application has been reviewed by your city planner, your city engineer, your city public works director. The Payette Lake Sewer and Water District has been provided to ITD, to Central District Health, to IDEQ, has been commented on by your Parks, Recreation, and Advisory Committee. So I would suggest that this applicant has not only brought professionals to the table to prepare the application, but this application has been thoroughly vetted by your staff and others. The suggestion that somehow if this were a public dedicated street, we would only be allowed to have 4 to 5 houses is just flatly incorrect. I don't know where it comes from, is not correct. The suggestion that the PUD is being used to increase the number of units is flatly incorrect. The continued reference in Mr. Spiegelman's letter to 60 or 70 homes, I guess must be talking about what might happen if every vacant lot were improved between Mather Road and downtown, but it has nothing to do with this project. This project is 12 new homes in compliance with the R4 zoning designation. Mr. Spiegelman's letter also says this project is applying for a rezone. It is not. This project is operating squarely within the parameters of the existing zoning. The suggestion that the pathway will not be used by people was not shared by the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. The sense was it will in fact be used. It is a safe, separated pathway from West Lake Street, and it's one of the reasons that the committee recommended, and it has now been incorporated as one of your conditions, that there be signage on the pathway that directs people towards downtown, so they know that this pathway is part of a network of pedestrian and bike paths that go to downtown. So the Parks and Recreation Committee certainly did not concur with the statement that this pathway will not be used. And my common sense and years in McCall tells me it absolutely will be used, and in part because there is very little safe pedestrian passage along West Lake Street due to the fact that many of the homes have built right to the edge of the right-of-way and are grandfathered in that regard. I must say I'm troubled by testimony that requests that you postpone this, and Mr. Spiegelman suggests you postpone it till the end of the summer. And that is testimony provided by the very same person who in his letter said they haven't even reviewed the application. So, you know, fair is fair. These applicants have spent a lot of money to put together what I think is a professional application, have gone to great lengths to make sure they comply with city standards, and I think have done so. You have a project that has 5 times the open space that you require, 1/3 less the lot coverage than you allow, I think, tremendous dedicated public amenity in the pathway, and a responsible approach to how these homes are laid out, and how they will be maintained. I, again, would be happy to try to adjust any questions the commission may have, or direct them to any other members of the team that are with us tonight. But if not, I appreciate the time and hope that the commission will be able to move forward tonight on these applications so that we can continue the process and move on to the city council.
Commissioners, do you have any questions at this moment for Steve or any of the other representatives? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. So at this point, commissioners, if you are able, and you can just flip your video on so that we can see each other to discuss. I understand that's not possible for everyone, but I'd like to hear where everybody is in terms of what we've seen and heard tonight on this project.
Sure. Do you want me to go first, Fallon? This is
Sure, that'd be great.
Just a generalized statement. In what was presented, I find it to actually be one of the better R4 presentations I've seen since serving as a commissioner. Very well thought out in terms of common space utilization, length of driveways. I particularly take note of their CC&Rs, which has a standard for maintenance, which provides landscape continuity and just keeping the place up over time where it is exposed to Lake Street. I think the mountain modern look is advantageous with the reduced heights. The pathway, I think that speaks for itself. As mentioned, they did not have to do that. That could have been incorporated in just more general park-like open space, but that pathway as a user of that for bicycle traffic is quite ingenious, where it takes that you out of that corner at Mather and then having to bisect into forest. And should that become available down the road where the alley is accessible, that's just an additional bonus, but I don't think we can count on that. And I think they've done their homework on the short-term rentals with answering that question with regard to increased traffic. So those are my observations.
Okay, thank you. I don't know. Commissioner Tunnel, are you on with us?
I'm finally back on. I've been kicked off 3 times. I apologize.
You're fine.
I've been questioned. I've gone from phone to PC to iPad, and I'm back in. I did, because I had the phone, was able to hear most of the comments, except for Commissioner Clements, except towards the end. And I guess from what I heard about the pathways, the design, the vision to create the pathway through to forest, to reduce the the footprints of the homes, allowing for greater open space. I just think it's a very well planned and well envisioned project.
Thank you. Commissioners at Legion Hall, I think we've got Commissioner Lyons and Commissioner Cron. Do you have comments?
Nothing really to add. I would just say that I completely agree. I mean, growth is inevitable, and I think this is a good plan versus what else could be put on that property versus condos or R8 as the future could be. So.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Lyons. I agree with pretty much all the comments so far. I do think it could have definitely had higher density put in there, especially with the lake views it would have. You could easily see somebody try to get even more there, a whole bank of condos or hotel or maybe not a hotel, but condos. Mm-hmm. So I think this kind of fits for the area.
Yeah, I agree. It kind of occurs to me that you can kind of tell it's a local team working on it, because it is not an overwhelming project in terms of scale or sort of just overall impression. I like that they've kept it sort of consolidated so that you are going to be able to retain that open space and forest feel a little more. It certainly could have been a different picture. As stated there, they could have had a lot of different options in terms of how they went forward with this. And I think overall, they've done a good job in the plan. So it's sounding like I understand that there are concerns from neighbors. However, I just, given sort of the process we've gone through, I mean, we saw this as a pre-application, we saw this, I mean, there are no big surprises, I guess. What we saw in the pre-application is very much what we're seeing today. That's been months ago, and it has been professionally presented, and I don't see any flags or concerns from a zoning or planning and zoning standpoint. So unless there's any further discussion or any of the items that have been brought up tonight through public hearing or otherwise, I think it sounds like we're ready for a motion.
So this is Commissioner Thompson. Morgan, there's 2 motions here, right? There's a couple to send to City Council and then a couple that we will approve, or I mean, that will either approve or deny. Is that correct?
That's correct. So there would be 2. There would be a recommendation for the PUD subdivision and development agreement to go to council. And then that would be with if you agree with myself and Mr. Milliman, condition 3 as amended. And then there would be just the subdivision and scenic route, which you could approve yourself this evening.
And what about the design review?
But what did I say? I meant design review and scenic route.
Okay, yep. So the subdivision and the PUD would be a
Subdivision PUD and development agreement
development agreement as well.
would be city council, and then design review and scenic route would be you guys.
So I move that we recommend for approval to city council as amended, PUD 2001, subdivision 2004, and the development agreement.
Okay. Is there a second?
This is Commissioner Clement's second.
Okay, I'll do a quick roll call if that's okay, Fallon.
Yes, that sounds good.
Commissioner Lyons,
Yes.
Commissioner Clements,
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnel,
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson,
Yes.
Commissioner Cron,
Yes.
Chair Faraday.
Yes.
Okay.
And then I move that we approve design review 2049 and scenic route 2013.
Commissioner Clement seconding that.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve design review 2049 and scenic route 2013. Do you want another roll call?
Sure. Commissioner Lyons,
Yes.
Commissioner Clements,
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnel, Commissioner Thompson,
Yes.
Commissioner Cron,
Yes.
Chair Faraday,
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnel. I wonder if he got kicked out again.
I know he's still there, but I don't know if he's available.
It's still a quorum. You can still,
Okay. Okay, so motion passed, I guess. Okay, thank you, everyone. We will move on to our next item.
Okay, thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Okay.
Fallon?
Yes.
This is Steve. I just received a text from Commissioner Tunnel.
Uh-huh.
And he says he's done for tonight. He keeps getting kicked off. So he's having to excuse himself for technical difficulties.
Okay, no problem.
Okay.
Thank you. All righty, so we will move on to conditional use permit 2003 and design review 2046 at 901 2nd Street. And if the representative or the applicant are available, we are ready for you.
Good afternoon, Morgan. This is Jeff Hatch. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. And I just requested to share my screen. Did you get that request, Morgan?
Not yet. Let me keep looking to see if it's on a different screen that I'm not seeing. No, but maybe if I just stop sharing, it'll let you share.
Also, possibly.
You want to try again?
Yes. Okay.
I don't know that it's working. Does anyone in Legion Hall see it?
We do not. Oh wait, here it goes. Yep, now we can see it.
Okay.
Good evening, Commissioners. Jeff Hatch with Hatch Design Architecture. Our address is 200 West 36th Street, Boise, Idaho 83714. Thank you for your consideration this evening for our conditional use and design review applications. So we wanted to start by showing a vicinity map of our project site, which is off of Park Street and 2nd in downtown McCall. City Hall is southwest of this site. We have the McCall Parks Department adjacent to us, Umpqua Bank to the west, US Bank to the north, and we have a range of retail buildings to the south, as well as a chiropractor. We had a couple, well, the underlining consideration that came out of our neighborhood meeting was concern for parking. And so although we do exceed parking, we did coordinate with Nathan Stewart and staff to increase the amount of parking by an additional 2 stalls than we previously had proposed at our pre-application meeting to continue to try to address the public concerns and requests. So as far as that, the parking, we originally had a discharge lane that exited back onto 2nd Street. We eliminated that and were able to add additional parking spaces in that location. So here we're showing the landscaping plan for the main level. Again, the majority of the hardscapes on the site are proposed as pervious pavers. And we have a range of plant palettes that are native to McCall and complementary to that climate zone. The ground floor plan, we have the proposed lobby for the hostel, as well as some storage amenity. And then we have 3 spaces that would be designated for commercial uses. One that we have slated for more of a food type business, one for retail, and one that is considered more for kind of professional, like a masseuse or someone of that nature. 2nd floor, we have the hostel with its proposed amenities of the laundry, the outdoor patio space, kitchen, and then a range of different uses, a couple more traditional hotel style rooms, and then our hostel as well. The patio for the hostel extends over the parking garage, and we have a range of seating areas as well as a staircase that would discharge onto the alleyway. The 3rd floor are proposed condos, which would just be 2 2-bedroom, and the same for the 4th floor. So a couple of those amenities for the hostel are the range of mixed rooms, ADA compliant units, the kitchen, laundry, the outdoor patio, and then a wraparound viewing deck. Talking with the owner and his enjoyment of the existing residence, there's a range of historic preservation elements to the existing Fay and Pete Wallace residence that we want to retain and utilize in this development, featuring some unique ceramic tile work, the kitchen work table, and some of the tile work on that work table, as well as some built-in display cabinets that we're wanting to repurpose, and the existing 1x12 wood to also be repurposed in the proposed development. Again, the main concern for coming out of our neighborhood meeting was concern for parking downtown, especially for that hostel. And so here we've generated a map that shows a 300-foot radius around our site, and then different accessible walking distances and times to public parking. So we have 4 within about a 4 to 5 minute walk, and 3 within that 300-foot radius for public parking for that hostel. So the intent for the parking on site would be for the condos and potentially for that commercial use down below. But the intended parking for all the hostel would be in the public parking spaces. Proposed development, as shown in the elevations, is 4-story with a combination of insulated metal panels and cedar plank siding. There has been some concern from neighborhood meeting and letters coming in as far as public comments about the height. And so we did look at a comparison between Alpine Village, which is a proposed, well, it is an existing 4-story structure, multifamily downtown, and really compared that. One of the main considerations versus the peak style or gabled style roof form, we've proposed a flat roof similar to the flat roof across the street to the south at the Parks and Rec. And that helps encourage that lower profile as we go into the downtown to really minimize the height restrictions there. One of the other considerations from our neighborhood meeting is originally at our pre-app, the form of the structure and the ceiling heights set the top of the roof at 50 feet. With comments from the commission and also the public, we reduced that by about 6 feet to 44 feet to the roof structure itself. So there's our concept rendering. And then doing a little bit of research and talking, Alpine Village currently sits about 20 to 22 feet above where our proposed site is. And as you go closer to the river or the lake, the closer you get into downtown and towards the lake, the hill and the terrain gradually goes towards that lake. And so that's where we get that reduction. And so there were some concerns from Alpine Village about us restricting or constricting their views. And a lot of that is alleviated simply from the terrain itself and that lower profile roof versus the gable. So those would be a couple of mitigation techniques. At this time, I'll stand for any questions that you have for myself, or I'm also with Bill Sickford, the applicant.
Commissioners, any questions for?
I had a question. Did he already cover the Snowmelt system? How does that work?
So it sounds like there's a question about the Snowmelt system. Could you address that?
Yeah, I'm just pulling up the utility plan
sorry.
so you can describe that properly. Sorry, I was just resharing my screen to be able to do that. So on January 11th, our civil engineer prepared a letter describing our intent as far as the Snowmelt system. And what we've designed is that the structure itself will retain that snow. Will go into a snowmelt system that is then drained into a basin that would be located in the northeast corner of the site, and then is designed to charge into our stormwater retention system, which is located in the center of the site. His initial site drainage data is assuming a runoff coefficient of 1. We're assuming the entirety of the roof structure itself, and utilizing a collection of internal rain leaders and downspouts that would then drain that down into the Snowmelt System. We're anticipating a maximum drainage length of about 85 feet, and the average slope of that drainage is about 1.5%. The total runoff volume is 552 cubic feet for 60 minutes.
So this is Morgan. I was just going to interject. Can you just explain like that this makes the rooftop or decks more usable throughout the winter, or if that's a result of this?
Yeah, good question, Morgan. So the intent of part of the solar panel array that we have proposed on this project, so I'll just go back up to our rendering so we can kind of explain this. The solar panel array does two things. It collects solar in the summertime, but it also has a bifacial system that collects off of the surface and patio space in the wintertime. And so you can generate electricity both during the summer and the winter. In the wintertime, these are angled to locate the snow into areas that would then melt and drain onto the rain leader located in the northeast corner of the building, which would then be piped over to that Snowmelt system underneath the parking lot. What that allows is we would have a range of usable outdoor patio spaces year-round. So versus just assuming that the snow is just going to sit up there all winter, that's not the case at all. And this will be designed to be able to maintain those as usable spaces.
Thank you.
Okay, unless there are any other questions, I'll throw it over to Morgan for staff report.
A question real quick on the rendition that you have, the upper, I guess it looks like the very top of the shade, or yeah, if you can go to the picture there. So those are the solar arrays on the very top up there?
Yes, sir.
And they're facing west, or I mean east?
They are facing south and east.
Okay, for that picture, this shows them facing east.
In this perspective, those panels appear to be flat, but they are not flat. They have an angle to them that allows them to pitch for drainage.
Okay. And so the top of those is 44 feet?
The top of the roof structure, which we can go back to the elevation.
Well, what's the top of the solar?
Top of the solar is proposed at 54 feet.
54 feet?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I have another question going back to parking. Who gets the covered parking?
Lisa, how we are currently anticipating the use of the parking is we would have 2 parking spaces per condo for a total of 8 parking spaces occupied by the 4 condos. In addition, we have 1 public ADA compliant parking space, and we have 1 additional parking space on site that could be used either publicly or it could be used for the commercial businesses on the ground floor, depending upon what the public and city deem appropriate. But at this time, we would propose that as a public space.
So you're just assuming the hostile tenants wouldn't be coming to town in a vehicle?
No, we would be assuming that they would either be utilizing the bus services, which we have a bus stop that is basically across the street to the west of this location. But the balance of individuals would be coming by car and would be utilizing the various public parking spaces available within 300 feet of the site. Part of the regulations of the hostel would be that they would be mandated to use those public parking spaces.
What about during the winter when they're closed for plowing? What is it, 2 to 6 a.m.?
In bringing that up with Morgan, it sounds like she would like us to develop a parking agreement with private parking adjacent to us. One consideration is we do have a range of banks around us that would have complementary hours to the requested hours in the public parking space. So we do not have a concrete answer to that yet because that agreement would have to be, actually memorialized.
Yeah, there are a few other businesses downtown that already have similar agreements to that. This Hometown what's the bank that's right next to them?
US Bank.
US Bank, I know Hometown and US Bank have an agreement. What's the one with May Marina? Don't they do the lot behind the library?
Yeah, so Morgan's going to get into the parking issue in our staff report, and I think that might answer a few of your questions. Because I think there were some different codes in place when those agreements went into place versus now.
Okay.
So I think she'll get into that.
Okay, any other questions at the moment? Okay, Morgan, would you mind doing staff report, please?
Absolutely. So, as the applicant's representative mentioned, this is a conditional use permit for the height to increase from 35 to 50 feet. Design review for it being a commercial mixed use building to contain retail, hostel, and I know the representative said condo, but the intent is apartments. So under single ownership. So this whole building would be owned by one individual and the apartments would be rented. They would not be bought or sold by different individuals. So I wanted to make that clarification, as well as a rooftop patio. A mixed use building is directly permitted in the CBD. So the apartments, hostel, commercial, that's all directly permitted. The conditional use permit is only for the height allowance to increase from 35 to 50, which CBD does allow with a conditional use permit. This application is in compliance with all aspects of the city code and no alleviation from basic development standards are being requested. So the property size is 0.17 acres. It's a rather small lot. They did show a vicinity plan, but here's another vicinity plan. You can see us over here at City Hall, the library. You can see Lake Street, the lake right at the end of Second. And this is the parcel that we're discussing. That's highlighted on the screen. So lot coverage in the CBD is allowed at 95%. So you can pretty much build out your entire lot with structure because the 95% takes into account only structures. And so in this case, the footprint of the building here is 2758 or 38% lot coverage. So they're less than half of their permitted lot coverage for the central business district zone. Building height in the CBD, as I mentioned, is permitted to go to 50 feet with a conditional use permit. There are exceptions to go above the height definition, so above 35 feet in other zones or above 50 feet in this zone, which include things like antennas, roof stair access enclosures, projections, cupolas, chimneys, steeples, spires. I know we approved an application for the hospital, it was 2 years ago, and they went just above the 50 feet with their CUP with some mechanical equipment, such as antennas or solar panels in this case. The applicant is proposing a roof height of 44 feet, as they discussed. So the roof itself would be 44 feet. Then there are guardrails, handrails, because it is a rooftop deck, that go up to 48 feet. And then the solar panels proposed at 54. But no other structures proposed to go above the 50. So there's no like pergolas above the 50. And the structure itself is not proposed either, just the solar panels. So there are no setbacks required in the CBD other than along an alley because they have parking on the north side of the structure. The only setback on this parcel is 3 feet from the alley, which is shown right here, and they're well behind that because they are including a surface parking lot. The surface parking lot is proposed to be covered with that rooftop deck, so it will not need to be plowed, so it will be usable all winter. So the applicant did say that they were proposing 2 spaces to be reserved per apartment because they are apartments code. Well, sorry, let me back up. This use is in an established urban renewal district. Per code, you are not required to provide on-site parking in an urban renewal district. So per code, they do not need to provide any on-site parking, and this would meet code. They have decided to provide 10 on-site spots. The parallel parking on the perimeter of the building takes it up to 17 parking spaces. If you weren't in an urban renewal area, you were asking how many spaces per unit, an apartment would require 1.5 if it wasn't in an urban renewal area. Because it is, and the intent is that the urban renewal area will likely provide or improve parking in these districts as like a public amenity. They are not required to provide it on site. Let's see. So they meet the parking code. We talked about that a little bit. So they have 10 on-site, 7 parallel. In addition to that, there are 5 parking lots within 1,000 feet of the proposed, 5 public parking lots within 1,000 feet of the proposed development. And there is adequate public transit that serves this project. Per the 2018 comprehensive plan, the plan calls for ensuring a strong, sustainable year-round economy of local business with additional hotel venues in the downtown area. The hostel, would meet that goal. It also talks about stated community character and design goals, committing to green design, efficient energy use, high-performing buildings. They talk about policy initiatives such as integrating green infrastructure elements and LED-rated buildings, which this is proposed to be, into the urban design of the city. They also talk about development of new energy efficient and emphasize the use of and implement best practices in site design and construction. Land use goals include supporting infill and redevelopment in the city limits, particularly commercial areas, and the original 4 blocks of the downtown core, which this is. I mentioned that this is in an urban renewal district, and so the purpose of that is to encourage new development and stimulate sort of the economics of this area. And then that brings up the tax base, and that money goes back into the community to improve and provide amenities such as public parking. Also regarding transportation, the comp plan identifies goals and policies for promoting development in the downtown core that connect easily to public transit and are designed to encourage walking and bicycling. I just wanted to highlight some of those areas of the comp plan that this project would meet and support. Moving along, there's a section on design guidelines. Similar to some of the other projects tonight, this project's moving in a sort of mountain modern aesthetic with the use of wood beams, wood slats, black accents. As one of the commissioners brought up, there is a snowmelt system that takes the roof snow and deck snow and melts it and collects it and directs it toward their stormwater system and allows additional usable outdoor areas in the winter, which makes this more of a, having a year-round outdoor component, which is hard in our climate. So conditional use permit criteria, as I mentioned, the conditional use permit is not for the hostel or the parking, it's for the 35 to 50 feet increase. And we've gone through these criteria pretty often, and if you're on our staff report, page 3 lists specifically the 12 criteria of approval for a CUP. So is it a use that's authorized in this zone? Yes. Is it harmonious and in accord with the general objectives and any specific objectives of the comp plan? Yes. Is it designed, constructed, and operated and maintained to be harmonious with the character of their neighborhood? Will it not be detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare of people living or working in the neighborhood? Will it not cause any substantially harmful environmental consequences? Will it not create excessive additional public costs? Will it be served adequately by essential public services? That it not involve uses, activities, processes, materials, noise, smoke, fumes, and other forms of pollution? Does it have vehicular approaches designed so as not to create a detrimental interface with the traffic on the surrounding streets? Will it not result in the destruction, loss, or damage of important natural or scenic or historic features? And is it on a site of sufficient size to accommodate the use? And will it have minimal negative economic impact on the neighborhood or surrounding community? So those are the 12 criteria that the commission should look at to see if, this increase in height from 35 to 50 feet, if it will comply with that. So there are some preliminary comments from the city engineer. We are unfortunately waiting on some more information from the sewer district. In the staff report, you will note that they said, in the future, they will run a sewer model to see if they can serve this capacity. It's proposed for 10 EDUs or equivalent dwelling units. McCall City Code would say it would be allowed for that. So we're checking with sewer to make sure it meets their density map. They were supposed to have that information back by tonight, but we didn't get it. So that might be one thing that the commission wants to consider when they decide if they're ready to make a motion or they want to postpone this for more information. There is comments from the fire district just regarding, sprinklers being required and how this would need to be constructed to meet fire code. Same with the building official. I have 4 letters that I received from the public that were summarized in your staff report. I received some additional letters. Let me see if I can read them. Let's see. I'm sorry. 2 additional letters that I sent out to the commission earlier today. One from Miss Lynn Lewinsky, who said she supported the concept but was concerned about the height. And then another letter from another business owner in the community that said that they supported the project. So I just wanted to make everyone aware that those 2 letters, while not summarized in the staff report, have been provided to the commission in advance for review. I did receive one more letter late in the day that did not get passed out. And so they requested that I read it into the record tonight, and I can do that. If you notice, there were no draft findings for this one put together for the commission to review because we really wanted your feedback and because we were missing some comments such as from the sewer district that we wanted to get as well. So whenever you're ready for the public hearing, Fallon, I can read this one letter from Pat Blanchard into the record.
Okay. Let's go ahead and I will open the public hearing. Just to reiterate for anyone who would like to speak about this project, who might be on the phone or here on Teams, I've opened the public hearing. I will go through and allow time for everyone to speak. And then we will give the applicant's representative or the applicant an opportunity to respond to any questions or concerns that are raised within the public comment period. And then we will close the public hearing. Once that's closed, then it is the commissioner's time to discuss, and there is no other discussion from others or comments. So just so everyone is aware, as Morgan said, we did receive letters that we were able to review, and I am going to let her start us off by reading a letter, and then we'll open up to anyone on the phone or on Teams.
Okay, so I apologize. This one's kind of long, but the woman promised me that she timed it when she read it, and she was able to read it in 3 minutes. So the letter is from Pat Blanchard, 616 North 3rd Street, McCall. I am writing on behalf of myself and several other property owners at Alpine Village with reference to the proposed development of the property immediately north of the library at 2nd and Park Streets. We are concerned about the development for a number of reasons. 1, lack of conformity to building heights in the general downtown. This new building will be considerably taller than other buildings downtown and will stick out like a sore thumb. We understand the legal building heights without special permits are 50 feet, but no other building in the core area comes close to that height. This building will be similar to allowing residential development to take place without regard to established setbacks in neighborhoods. While there may be circumstances that make it legal, nothing makes it right, and this variance from the established norms ruins the character of their neighborhood. This building also will not conform to your own planning guidelines as you are in the process of codifying, including scaling relative to surrounding buildings. Because the property in question is fairly small, the only way, apparently, enough revenue can be squeezed out of the building there is to go up. We don't believe this is economic imperative for this particular developer, a strong enough argument to destroy the character of the neighborhood. People live in the downtown area too, contributing to the core area vitality and continuity. Not just commercial interest should be considered in the planning process. 2, lack of view shed to Alpine Village and the proposed library expansion and associated loss of property values. The proposed development will put new construction in the direct view of all the condominium owners on the north side of the building at Alpine Village. A photo is attached of one such view to show you how significant views will be impacted. This is in total violation of your strategic planning adopted by the City Council in 2018. Specifically in the comp plan, it states, ensure that new development protects the treasured views of Payette Lake and adjacent landscapes from roadways, frequented public areas, community gateways, downtown, and other public spaces. Policy, they highlighted a policy, protect key view corridors throughout McCall, including views from Lake Street and northerly views along Mission 3rd, 2nd Street, and 1st Street. Policies to restore view corridors by supporting redevelopment of underutilized buildings and creating visual breaks between buildings adjacent to the lake. Policy 4, protect and enhance views of the surrounding natural landscape in the Payette Lake by reducing, removing, or undergrounding visual obstacles such as utility lines. 4, continue to protect the surrounding natural landscape and edges of the city by using a variety of techniques such as requiring clustering, creating conservation easements, or purchasing private property. 5, protect and incorporate natural features into newly developed areas. Conserve the natural patterns and function of streams, ridgelines, topography, riparian areas, and wildlife. This goal is so specific as to describe the actual viewshed that will be ruined by the proposed development. There are other property developers in the core area that are being sensitive to conforming to the downtown character. As an example, the proposed Ponderosa Center near the lakeshore is limiting its height to 2 stories so as not to impair the views of the properties behind it. There are community-minded developers, and apparently there are not. The view of the proposed library expansion will be ruined by this new building across the street from it. All of your marketing drawings and other materials reflect a view of the mountains and lake will need to be amended to reflect the reality of this new building if it's being approved. As a library patron, I strongly object to this change to the planned ambiance of the library. Views impact values. As you eye the increased tax base from a new building going up on 2nd, you also need to consider the impact on values of existing properties whose values are enhanced by their existing views. Next bullet, inadequacy of parking. The city planning department told me that due to the location of the subject property in the urban renewal area of the city, that conforming to parking requirements are waived and the burden of providing adequate parking falls to the city. The parking area behind the library was cited as providing the parking that would be needed. We have a full unimpeded view of this parking lot and know that this space is already overcommitted for the existing library building. City employees and people coming to City Hall, the new transit center, employees and visitors and commuters, the new thoroughway from Park Avenue through the parking lot to 1st Street, city parks and recreation employees, equipment and visitors, as well as snow storage. We wonder what you would want more, to provide parking for this new development as proposed or to provide parking for the new library. We can guarantee parking for the library will be an issue in getting the bond approved for the library if you give away yet more parking. This does not speak to the general relief for parking in the downtown core for patrons and visitors you are trying to attract. This parking lot is totally packed during the summertime and pretty full right now. It does not need and cannot handle more pressure from subsidizing the proposed development's parking needs. In addition, due to the overnight nature of stays at the proposed hostel, inadequate on-site parking will force customers to use either surrounding areas, streets, or the library parking overnight. This will interfere with street and parking lot maintenance that is done in the early morning hours. If the city cannot follow its own plans adopted recently, significant credibility issues will surface regarding any planning, decisions, or actions taken by the city. Citizens simply will not be able to trust the city to follow its own rules. This photo shows the approximate location of the building being proposed and was taken from one of the condominiums that will be impacted by this construction. Obviously, the quality of the affected area is drawn by a non-professional, but it is accurate depiction of our argument. That was in her letter. I wasn't calling her a non-professional. And this was the image that was provided, although I don't know what that line is based on. So I wanted to show you because it was in the letter.
Thank you, Morgan. Okay, so we are going to move forward, and anyone who would like to speak, who is either on Teams or on the phone, now is the time. And if you are on the phone and you want to speak, you have to hit *6 to unmute yourself. And it might take a little time there's kind of a lag. So just keep talking, and eventually we'll hear you, and I'll let you know when we hear you. And the little hand raise button is also helpful. If you're on Teams and you push that, that gives me an indication that someone would like to speak also. Is there anyone? Anyone like to speak about this project? Okay, maybe not. We do have some concerns that have been raised via letters, however. So would the applicant like to address sort of these concerns that we're hearing about, particularly parking, view shed, and et cetera, sort of the things that have been brought up?
Yeah, this is Jeff Hatch again, and I'm here with Bill Sifford, and these are the two real primary concerns that we had from our neighborhood meeting as well. And so, in regards to parking, as Morgan kind of recapped in her staff report, we already meet the parking that is required for the development, and we could really build out another almost 70% of this site and still meet the parking requirements. So in addition to the previous parking that we were providing, we've now increased that to 10 parking spaces to really try and show the community that we're wanting to be respectful to parking and that need for this site and this use. As far as the concerns for height, as the downtown core of McCall continues to develop and new developments come into place, we would anticipate more development similar to Alpine Village, that 3 to 4 story criteria. And right now we're engaged with the Integrated Design Lab, coordinating some of the sustainable features and considerations for what we could do with this building as far as the sustainable attributes for how the building is heated and cooled, as well as the Snowmelt system and the photovoltaics which we've discussed. I was going to take a moment to have Bill kind of speak a little bit about his intent in living there, and also his dream for this development.
Yeah, this is Bill. I've got to get to the speaker.
It can.
Oh, it's okay?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, it's my intent when I decided to go with this lead building. I have a degree in environmental health, and so I'm really interested in things like this, you know, the alternative energies and things like that. When I first moved there, you know, it had 2 big willow trees in front, and I thought, wow, this is a neat place. I was living in Boise at the time. I think I'll just buy that house, and I was able to. And but then, you know, you guys started developing it, and when I went down to Hotel McCall to look at the development, I thought, wow, this is really neat. And so, you know, there's a saying when, like, you know, some people might think this is a lemon, that, oh my God, they're developing all around me. But when you're given lemons, you make lemonade. And so I'm sitting there looking, wow, maybe I could really do something with this place and produce a lead building, have some leading technology in energy production. I was just talking to Idaho Power today, and they said, well, Bill, you could probably use that groundwater in a heat pump, a groundwater heat pump. And then he was telling me how efficient it was. If somebody, and you know, the solar panels, new technology is coming with solar panels all the time, with batteries, it's coming all the time. And I would, as a lead building, this is going to be on a national register. And so when we put these apartments in, the energy, I'm thinking the energy use is going to be a whole lot less than what that house is right now. And well, and so that kind of stuff really, really interests me. So that was my intent. And also we need more. I mean, there's spaces in McCall that I've seen around, but they're all empty spaces. I asked somebody about that, and they said, well, that's rich people land banking. And you know, I want to have an active site there. My wife is a hypnotherapist. One of those offices down there will be hers. And if we can get some other wellness people in there, that's what my focus will be. In the second story, you're going to see, what did I count? Three cooking stations, or 4? 3. And I'd like to see culinary arts taught in there and have it as a dual purpose kitchen, one for the people in the hostel, but also for teaching culinary arts. I've been living there now I've owned it for 4 or 5 years. Oh, wait, 7 years. I've owned it for 7 years. And, you know, I've been off and on at first, and then, you know, it's full time now. And the last few years it's been full time. And, you know, after 5 o'clock, there's nobody downtown. I just, you know, it's dead down there. I mean, the deer come over and say hi, but that's about it. But I think this thing is going to really spark the downtown, just like your intentions were when you developed that downtown area. I think it's going to be a great asset. Oh, did I mention the lead certification was on a national scale? Did I mention that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. I didn't remember if I mentioned that or not. Which, you know, to me, when you have, and I'm not some brilliant scientist or anything, I just have a lot of ideas, but to me, if I knew this lead building, and I'm looking for a gold standard in the lead building, there's one higher than that's titanium, platinum. But I want to go for the gold standard in I'm not going to say high elevation, that would be like 8,000 feet, but at 5,000 feet, we're in a snow belt, And I think this would be a good place for an applied science building. I've talked to people from, not staff from University of Idaho, but students from, and people from Boise State and University of Idaho. And they're going, wow, that would be neat to just come to visit, because we're going to have an array of dials to give us feedback on how much energy is being produced by the different apparatuses we have. I'd like to keep an open spaces for people who might have an invention, an energy producing invention. Maybe Idaho Power would come up with something, or some individual in Idaho County that I'm looking for right now has piqued the interest of a lot of people. I just can't find him because I want to talk to him, put something up there. So, I'm still living there. If I don't get approved, I'll still live there. So that's about where I sit. I have several options, I knew those options were split it up and sell it. And then I found out another option was you could get investors and just own it yourself. And the guy told me, you could pay it back and all that, or I could just sit there and live there. So that's kind of what I feel my options are.
Okay.
I want to own it myself, but I'll either own it myself as a 4-story building, or I'll sit there and own it and live there. I enjoy it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think I still haven't gotten any kind of call outs for public hearings, so last call. Anyone would like to speak?
I would just thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. So commissioners, I would like to get some feedback on all of these kind of, especially sort of the hot button items that we've kind of gotten into tonight: parking, the height, sort of the impact as you see it on the area. Yeah.
This is Commissioner Lyons. I've got some concern with the height. With those solar arrays or solar, I mean, that's substantial amount of the roof. It's basically a whole new roof for the most of it. It's not small mechanical items that are allowed for the height. It's 54 feet, and that's substantial. You can't really tell from the picture or the rendition there, if they're going to be angled to the south, is that going to create a glare for the Alpine Village? And what kind of angle? I mean, you just can't tell much with that, or the angle, how the snow is going to shed off of it, if it builds up on it. I personally do not see that being harmonious with the neighborhood in the area. The drawing doesn't really fully represent the buildings next to it and how it'll be in the shadows of those buildings, or create the shadow of those, especially to the east. I mean, there's not much we can do on the parking, but I don't remember if the plan, I don't know how they're going to have the solar storage, or if there's a mechanical room for that. There probably is someplace. But even mentioned the idea of additional things being put on the roof. So at what point do we have control if they just put anything else up there that's being seen again by the Alpine Village? But I think my biggest thing is the height being well over not just the 44 feet as they're stating, but up to 54 feet. And again, as far as the CUP, I just do not see it being harmonious with the neighborhood.
This is Commissioner Clements. I agree with Rob's comments with regard to the height, and particularly the solar panel issue. The solar panels, by the way, do need to be south southwest to make them function properly. I'm concerned about the parking in particular as a result of the hostel with the overnight situation. And it seems quite difficult to manage that, where you have public parking, and especially with our snow removal requirements. I understand the applicant's desire to seek parking from neighboring businesses, but I just would raise the question, how do you effectively manage that? In terms of the height of this structure overall, it would have been helpful had the applicant provided some drone video or drone still pictures to show just how the impact of this truly works with regard to the surrounding view shed. And again, lastly, and this is just a comment as a business guy, I'm somewhat suspect of the economic viability of this, simply because of the mixed use proposed. And that's it.
Thank you. Commissioner Thompson, do you have any comments? Or Commissioner Cron?
Not a lot to add. I saw a lot of reservation when it comes to the parking. I do know in our comprehensive plan, we did have that drawing or that rendering for a future parking garage or whatnot. I mean, I don't know if there's some type of development agreement the city can come up with developers developing downtown these urban areas so they can contribute to that. From somebody who spends a lot of time downtown, I do find that parking is a big issue, whether it's not morning, afternoon, evening. A lot of times I have a hard time finding spots. I've often had notes left in my car for retailers in town saying, oh, parking's 2 hours. You're here longer than 2 hours. Well, it's hard to find spots sometimes. So also, if these people are going to be parking, are we going to be code enforcing the 2 hours? How's that going to affect it? I think the building itself, it's really innovative. It's modern. It's cool. It's very technical. I just don't think the density that with the hostel, that this is the right location for it.
Commissioner Thompson, feel free to jump in. I would agree with the concerns raised. I like the design. I like the concept. I understand kind of the hesitation because of where it's sitting and what's around it. But looking at McCall's downtown, there hasn't been a whole lot significant development. I mean, you look at the buildings surrounding, they've been there a long time, right? Like there's not been, new structures built in this area. So of course, something brand new like this is going to be very much in contrast. So for me, that feels more like McCall's growth a little bit. Like we're just, it's kind of uncomfortable, I think, for everybody at various points and various sort of flex points. So I'm not completely opposed at all to the design or the idea, but there are some serious problems in consideration to parking and sort of the impacts there. I think if you're planning to have people stay in sort of a hostel hotel setting, you have to have somewhere for them to put a vehicle. Even if you have them parking on sort of an auxiliary lot at another business, there's still going to need to be snow removal. So that's tricky. Let's see, there was one other thing. And I would echo sort of the desire to see sort of a rendering that would show us how this impacts the visual landscape from somewhere like Alpine Village, because that is sort of one of the higher points in downtown area, just to give us a sense of what that sort of max height 50 foot in this location would look like relative to the surrounding area. So yeah, it's sounding like I don't know if you guys have interest in requesting further information, so pushing this into the future, seeing if we can get some more definitive information back, sort of that the parking idea, the height, some kind of rendering to give us a sense of that, or if you are completely closed to proceeding at all. I need to have some direction there.
So this is Commissioner Thompson. It looks like I missed some of this because I was putting kids to bed, so apologize for not being present. I echo a lot of these other comments. In the staff report, it said that there was, Morgan mentioned that the sewer district was running their models, so they needed time. I'd be in favor of continuing this to the next meeting. I don't know what that would gain us, but maybe the sewer district would say you can only do 8 EDUs as opposed to 10, and so that knocks the floor off of this building, and maybe that would be sufficient. I don't know, and it'd just be interesting to see, hear from what some of those like what the sewer district has to say about this.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Clements, what are you thinking?
Well, I'm a bit stuck on this one, Fallon. I mean, I agree with your comments with regard to the design. Yes, it's trendy, especially that ground floor, with the thought that went into that. My concern is we don't have enough data to really know how this impacts those who are concerned about their view shed. Mm-hmm. And without proper elevation, that's why I suggested a drone. As you know, we've seen that before in proposals to this body where we've had drone footage that actually would go up to the 40-foot level, 50-foot level, whatever, and show what it is there, and also at the street angle perspective. I find that very helpful. And then we also don't have much data on what the parking plan is. The applicant and the applicant's representative seem to be a bit uncertain as far as details. Mm-hmm. And if we move this forward, I'd certainly like to have something a little more definitive as to where in the world the hospitals state people are going to park. Because to me, that's a big issue for other businesses as well as the public downtown.
Yeah, so you would be interested in continuing to get sort of that further information to get a more clarified picture of what we're looking at.
Sure, if more data that is a little more to answering those questions were able to be presented, yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Cron and Lyons, would you be amenable to that idea of moving this forward, not moving it forward, but continuing it so that we can get a little more information, perhaps give the applicant an opportunity to adjust and do a little more digging in terms of what's actually going to happen in reality?
I'm open to it.
I think there definitely has to be some more information provided to regarding a lot of what Steve had said, as well as, maybe some clarification from our staff as well, as far as going to the 54-foot with that much solar panels. Is that what was intended for the 50-foot with that? So I think there's definitely some more information that would be needed.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion? So actually back up before we do that. I think we need to kind of create our wish list on what exactly we are asking for. So for my part, yes.
This is Michelle Grunewald. I just wanted to interject that I just want to remind the commission that when you're asking for additional information, make sure that it's relevant to your decision-making criteria that you need to use for the CUP. So I think questions regarding height are good ones. I think things related to parking, unless they're linked to those CUP criteria, might be a little overreaching in terms of what the code requires versus you can't necessarily impose stricter requirements unless it's linked back to the CUP criteria. So that's my only request, is that you kind of keep it related to that CUP requirement.
So Michelle, isn't part of that criterion, I don't have it in front of me, so help me out with this, but isn't it based on impact to neighboring properties when it comes to parking?
Do you mind pulling that up in the staff report?
Sure. It is based on your impact to neighboring properties, but the CUP is specifically for height. This application meets all code requirements for parking. So I think what Michelle was saying is you can't require that they provide 20 parking spaces when code says that they can provide 0, and they're already providing 10. Like, they're already providing in excess of what the code requires. I think that's what Michelle was trying to convey.
Correct, and I think what we're asking is the plan on how to not have a negative impact on neighboring properties with regard to parking.
With regard to height, the CUP is for height. The CUP is not for the parking. The CUP, the parking is permitted. The CUP, the only conditional request here is about height.
Okay.
Yes.
So given that information, I suppose that our comments about parking and the comments that we've heard, it just sort of throws back to the applicant that this issue exists. So they do with it what you will. Like, does a hostel make sense? But I mean, that's not our decision, obviously. But in relation to the CUP, I definitely would like to see some more renderings associated with the sort of height relation to surrounding buildings, sort of different perspectives. If I don't know what the best way to do that is, but just to give us a sense of what we're dealing with in terms of a visual impact.
The only thing that I would interject is that since we are requesting new information, we will need to reopen the public hearing and continue it to March 2nd so that the public has the time or the ability to comment on any new materials introduced.
Okay.
And this will also allow us time to get the comments back from the sewer district.
Yes. Would anyone like to make a motion to reopen the public hearing?
I got a quick question on number 7 of the CUP, the very end there. The applicant may be required as a condition of approval to mitigate any deficient public service. Would the parking fall into deficient public service?
I don't think so.
That wouldn't be?
No.
Okay.
It's not specifically listed there.
Public service.
It's not really a service. I mean, I think one thing like the commission should also consider is, I mean, we do collect parking data and we'll continue to do so. We've had a lot of our public parking lots that have been staging areas for construction of downtown. So I think once the downtown project gets redeveloped, we'll start truly seeing the way that it functions, and we'll be able to collect more data on usage. There's also kind of something called off-peak hours. So just as I think the applicant was saying, around 5 o'clock, portions of downtown goes dead because we have a lot of businesses that close at 5 o'clock. And so there is parking. I think there's parking constraints in certain areas of downtown at certain times, but it's not as though every single parking, we're not at 100% or even 90% occupancy in the evenings. And so I understand the concerns about snow plowing and snow storage, and I think those have to be considered. But really, I think the code is what the code is right now, and the idea is that you create centrally located public parking lots, and specifically the downtown master plan was encouraging people to redevelop their properties so we don't have all these surface parking lots that are typically not found in downtown areas. I mean, our downtown is basically mostly 1 story with surface parking lots on every single lot. So, so I think like what Morgan was saying is that this application really is about the height, and what the commission needs to do is determine, is the height appropriate in this location? And that's really what the CUP is about. And I think the discussions about parking go back to basically code requirements, and like, is that something we have to look at some point in the future? Is our code requirements as it relates to parking, as it relates to the data that we have on parking?
Okay. Well, I know it's one other thing on there, and one thing that I had mentioned as well, if they're going to do some additional information, I'd be curious on what they could provide with the glare of the solar panels, because of the height of Alpine Village, that glare could affect them. Obviously, people on ground wouldn't notice anything, but because they're above that, and if it's going to be pointed south, it's going to be pointed right at them. So I'd like to see some data on that.
I would also just add that I think that it's a good idea for the commission to specify what sort of things you want. Do you want additional renderings? Do you want a glare study? Do you want more of a 3D model where you can fly around? Do you want actual drone footage? I mean, I think that would be really helpful for the applicant in preparing for the next meeting.
All of the above, I think. Because, yeah, I think to have that, because you really can't tell. I mean, a 3D drawing, we see it when they put some houses on the lake, they'll insert a house to give you an idea how it sets within the trees. You know, that artist rendition doesn't really give you a good feel of how it really is downtown. So I think a better 3D rendering of that, definitely the height. There's also clarification from staff on the height on the 54 feet, since it's not 44, it's actually 54 with the solar, but I think in the conditional use permit, you got to, how it affects the view corridor, which it would affect the view corridor of quite a few units of the Alpine Village.
And that's just one other thing I wanted to point out to the commission is that there is no design criteria specifically about protecting view sheds of private properties.
Doesn't it say something on here though?
I think those are natural view sheds from public spaces, not necessarily private spaces. So we always say, if you want to own the view,
yeah.
you need to buy the property in front of it, right? So just because you have a view now, you may not be guaranteed that view into the future, because we have a downtown that's essentially a 1-story downtown. So.
And that's not going to stay that way, right?
54 feet was never intended either, and that's a fairly substantial roof structure, so 54 feet is quite a bit higher than what somebody would anticipate. But anyway.
Okay, so Morgan, is it clear what we're asking for?
I think so. I made a list. So sewer staff comments on going from 50 to 54 for mechanical, like solar, renderings of height from different perspectives, a study on the glare, and possibly drone footage or something like that, exploring the height.
Okay.
Or some kind of like 3D modeling.
Right.
Yeah. So can I get a motion to continue the public hearing and then a motion to can that be in one motion to continue to March?
Yeah, I think you can just have a motion to open and continue the public hearing to March 2nd.
So this is Commissioner Thompson. I move that we continue, reopen the public hearing and continue this to our March meeting. That's sufficient.
I think so. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Clements, second.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Perfect. Thank you. And thank you, Michelle, for the help kind of clarifying. That's helpful. Do we need like a 5-minute break?
I could use 5 minutes.
Okay, let's come back at 7:35. How about make it an even number or an uneven number? So yeah, let's take a little break and we will come back at 7:35.
All right. I like Morgan. She's like, I could use 5.
Yeah.
She's a pregnant lady.
I know, poor thing.
Can you get a 5-minute break from the back?
I wasn't sure if Bill Pumpkin is also on the phone, if he was gonna add any like legal, but I just wanted to make sure that we were staying within the scope of what we could ask for.
How far out are we from that parking garage? Because I feel like that would be much needed.
So we established a new urban renewal agency 2 years ago. So we're starting to like collect those funds. It's gonna take a while.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Parking garages are really expensive. People don't realize that.
Oh, concrete.
Yeah,
Metal.
it's basically about anywhere from $50,000 to $75,000 a space. That's how, so that's the whole thing with parking, right? Like more parking, like I think I sent you that article.
Yeah.
So like basically what parking does is it drives up land values, right? Because you have to push it. Like, I mean, this project's an interesting one. Like they could spread out, you know, on their lot more. But they're providing a lot of they're providing some surface parking on their site. So basically your land values have to be like pretty high to justify a parking structure. And the other piece of it is that you have to have, like you wanna have basically an occupancy of 90% or above in your downtown. That means you have like a really like hopping downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, so the idea of like, there's not enough parking, like actual numbers and perception are like a little bit different because I think people have always been used to parking right in front of their intended use, right? Like you want to be able to park like right in front of the store you want to go to or whatever, the bar or whatever. And so, so we have certain areas that are really congested and like obviously in the summer, sometimes we're at 90 or 100% and those streets are just booked, right? You're never gonna find a parking spot. But if you go around the block, you'll find like parking spots or we've got our public parking lots that are often not full. And then you also want to balance the off-use hours. So like the idea that you have some uses in the evenings, like say a bar or a brewery that's packed during the night. And then you've got like the banks that close at 5. And so that's where like the shared parking comes in. If you can set up shared parking agreements to utilize those spaces so that you're not building, you know, surface parking, because it's basically.
Oh yeah, I mean, surface parking makes no sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it really doesn't, but I mean, it's kind of like how you get to that in a non-super chaotic way where people can still function downtown.
Yeah.
Especially with the winters we get too. Like, what do you do with, you know, if someone wants to park overnight at a bank, they still have to plow.
Yeah, so the other piece of this, like the parking issue is also snow storage, that a bunch of our public parking lots become snow storage in the winter.
Yeah.
So again, like I think at the point at which there's demand for it, like we'll be trucking, and we already do that, like to some extent, truck snow out of downtown, but we'd be doing that kind of stuff more regularly.
Or
Because
just
that's,
doing it in a different method. And
that's
then some plow it in the middle of the road and then come and pick it up like right away and then
truck it out.
Yeah,
instead of
exactly.
plowing
And
it.
so, and part of that, like, there's a cost associated with that, right? And we're just, we
Yeah.
don't have the tax base. I mean, the reality is, I think, like, if you had your downtown build out a little bit more and you built up that tax base, you'd start to see like those revenues to justify some of those services, but we're just not quite there yet.
Yeah.
Like, and I honestly feel like when the downtown project's done, like everything's been under construction for the last couple of years. And then it's like, we're staging back here, we're staging on First Street. And so it takes all of those parking spaces out of circulation too for the general public. So, so I think like, you know, as that project finishes up in like the summer, we'll pick up the parking like study again, where we basically do occupancy studies during peak and non-peak times. And then we track it over the years to kind of see where we're at. And like what we're finding is, yeah, there's an increased like demand for parking. We have definitely like hot zones.
Yeah.
And then, but we're like sort of not there yet, you know, in terms of the actual like numbers. It's more of like a convenience thing that it's like people can't park like right where they want to park, you know, like they have to walk.
Yeah,
And I mean, honestly, up until a couple of years ago, you were kind of like, it felt really far when you had to park a couple blocks away because you're like, there's no sidewalk, right? And so that was part of it. It was like, oh, I'm parking in like a dusty lot and there's no sidewalk to get there and whatever. And so I think slowly as like the downtown kind of comes together, it'll kind of start functioning and working better than it has been. But yeah. Parking's always like a hot topic, right? Regardless. But it's an interesting thing because it also drives up the cost of land, you know, and I don't know if you saw that article, but
yeah, that was interesting.
Just like the statistics, there's a really good book, a professor from UCLA who wrote this book, it's called, it's kind of a bore, but there's some good articles that summarize the book. And I should send it to you guys, but it's called The High Cost of Parking, and it's basically how, because of planning and zoning codes all over the country, like people think that parking's like the science, like that the idea that, you know, you have to have, you know, one space per 100 square feet of retail space, like, or restaurant space, right? And so then all of a sudden these became these little tables and everybody adopted them in all these communities. And then it became like the science. It's like, you don't have enough parking based on there. And it's like, well, who made up that original concept anyways, right? And so the idea behind it, and so it's really interesting because in the planning world, there's been a movement to actually cap parking rather than, there used to be minimum parking requirements, and now what a lot of cities are doing.
Zero?
They're saying,
surprised by that.
They're saying maximum because they're like, actually, we want to see places build out and we want to plan for the parking in strategic location.
Which makes sense.
As opposed to having like
availability and the free space to do that.
Yeah. And McCall's in a good position because we have public parking lots at the end of every single block, like in the original downtown core. So we actually have quite a bit of land.
She's the funds.
Yeah, we don't even have developed parking, like we don't even have surfacing, we don't even have like asphalted proper parking spaces, right? And so that also creates like chaos because people don't park right.
Nobody parks right. Nobody ever parks right. It's absolutely crazy.
So.
Okay. Are we back?
Hey, Morgan, are you back?
Oh, yeah, I've been back.
Okay. Let's go ahead and keep going. So our next item is PUD 0501 Development Agreement Amendment.
Fallon, this is Commissioner Clements.
Yes.
Yes, I need to recuse myself from this one because I am within the 300 feet of this proposal, and I intend to speak about this proposal in the public hearing. So I'm going to check out as a commissioner here for a while, okay?
No problem. Thank you. Okay. Do we have Amy Pemberton or? someone who's speaking. Let me look.
We have Amy Pemberton.
Welcome.
Thank you all for being here, Madam Chair and members of the commission. I know this is a long night and I appreciate you sticking with all the hazards of online hearings. My name is Amy Pemberton. I'm here on behalf of Shore Lodge Whitetail LLC. My address is 706 North First Street. Also out there somewhere, I think, is Dan Scott and Tom Garcia, who is the president of the Whitetail Homeowners Association. The application before you tonight is an amendment to the Whitetail Development Agreement. The original development agreement was signed in 2005, and then there were 4 additional amendments to that development agreement. And so each time there's a new phase to Whitetail, there's a new amendment to the development agreement. The original development agreement provided for 5 gates to be in Whitetail. And we could point all those out, but can you do that, Morgan, or can I do that? It's okay. We're just worried about 2 of them. So the amendment that Whitetail is now proposing is on this, what the map that you have on the screen. You can see where it says existing mid-mountain gate location proposed to be relocated. Thank you so much. So the existing gate is right there at Mid-Mountain, and Whitetail is proposing to move that existing gate up to the proposed new gate location. And that new gate location is basically immediately south of Kings Pines Estates 1. And so currently there is a kiosk located in that proposed new gate location that has a red-green light, and when somebody comes up to it that has a fob in their car, the light will turn green to authorize them to enter into Whitetail. You can also enter a code that authorizes people to come into Whitetail. And the reason that's there was to try to cut down on unauthorized traffic, vandalism, and trespassing. And that was put in 2016, and it worked for a while, and now it's not working so great. People are coming through Whitetail, and there are also problems. Whitetail just thinks that moving the gate will be better from a safety perspective. It makes a lot more sense for first responders to have a gate at the perimeter of the project instead of halfway down the mountain. The new location is a flatter spot, and it also, let's see, what are the other? It reduces traffic on Club Hill Road, which is what gives access to Kings Pines Estates. And there are also quite a few homes now above that gate. Oh, that's a good map. There are quite a few homes now above the gate. And so it will give them, if we move the gate to the entrance, it will give those people better access to the Whitetail amenities. So the Whitetail Homeowners Association Board met with the Kings Pines Estates 1 Homeowners Association Board to talk about this moving the gate. And they had a great conversation and agreed on a few things that would be beneficial to both HOAs. And one of the things is that Whitetail will agree to improve. There are safety features that can be improved at the intersection of Club Hill Boulevard and Migratory Ridge. And Whitetail's been working with Valley County Road Department on this, and they will, of course, pay for that improvement. Whitetail has also agreed to have alternate routes required for large truck traffic so that it will reduce the impact to Kings Pines for basically construction in Whitetail. The Club Hill Boulevard and the Migratory Ridge intersection will be swept by the Whitetail HOA annually as requested by the Kings Pines Estates HOA in case there is construction debris in that intersection. And then also pedestrian access will be allowed on specified roads, basically what's above the current gate for existing owners in Kings Pines 1. And these conditions are all included in the proposed amendment that's in the application either in the amendment to the development agreement itself or attached as an exhibit to that amendment to development agreement. And the proposed amendments in your packet also address all of the requests to public comments that you've received from Kings Pines owners so far. So then the question is, the McCall City Code currently does not allow gates. All existing gates in Whitetail are non-conforming under the current McCall City Code, but the 2005 development agreement was signed prior to the enactment of that code. The staff report mentions McCall City Code section 3.11.05, which is the non-conforming structure code. And that states that a non-conforming structure can continue as long as the structure remains otherwise lawful. But it also says that when a non-conforming structure is moved for any reason over any distance, it shall conform to the regulations for the zone to which it is moved. But this reference to non-conforming structure ignores that prior POD approval and that prior development agreement that was signed in 2005 that allowed for 5 gates. And it also ignores the fact that that use with the gates is a constitutionally protected use. The question should instead be whether this application represents an impermissible expansion of the non-conforming but constitutionally protected use included in the development agreement. Relocating one of the gates but maintaining the restriction of not having more than 5 total gates does not represent any expansion of a non-conforming use. Our application is just a reconfiguration of a pre-existing use, not an expansion. Idaho courts have long recognized the constitutional right of a landowner to continue land uses that predate a later enacted ordinance. Courts have said that such a right is guaranteed by the due process clauses of both the United States and the Idaho constitutions. There's an Idaho case, it's a 2010 Supreme Court case called Edens v. City of Lewiston that really fits with what's going on here. In that case, the city of Lewiston tried to restrict a pre-existing mobile home park from putting a new recreational vehicle in place of an older recreational vehicle that was parked in the mobile home park, because the city had adopted a new ordinance that said you can't have recreational vehicles in mobile home parks. And the court said that the city cannot restrict that prior use. They look at it on a case-by-case basis, but they say that they look to whether the character of the non-conforming use has substantially changed. And I think it's clear in this case, the character of the non-conforming use does not substantially change just by moving one gate from one location to another. You certainly have the discretion to either approve or deny an amendment to the development agreement, but the existing ordinance related to gates and non-conforming structures is not applicable to the Whitetail PUD and therefore should not bar your consideration of this application. Whitetail believes that the amendment should be approved because the new location is much more practical. It will provide for improved emergency services, and with additional improvements to be constructed by Whitetail at the Club Hill Road and the Migratory Ridge intersection, it'll be increased safety. Whitetail has worked closely with Kings Pines Estates 1 to draft an amendment that is beneficial to both subdivisions, and we respectfully request that you recommend approval of the 5th Amendment to the Whitetail Development Agreement as provided in the application. And so that's all I have for that, but if you have any questions about how the amendment would work, where the gate would go, or anything to do with the legal question, I'm happy to answer that. And then I'm sure Dan or Tom would be happy to answer questions as well.
Questions at all? It doesn't sound like it. So Amy, why don't we go ahead and get Morgan's staff report, and then we'll we'll circle back if some come up. Morgan, could you do staff report, please?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Okay. Yes, Morgan Bisa, I'm here. Amy did a great job presenting this application, covered a majority of things, so I'll try to keep it brief. On the screen in front of you, you can see the white-tailed PUD. You can see where the existing gate is internal to the development, and they are proposing to move it to the periphery of the development. So it would no longer just be on a private street, it would be at the intersection with a public street, Club Hill, right here at this intersection. As she mentioned, total number of gates remain the same. This is a modification or a request to modify the Whitetail Development Agreement signed in 2005. That agreement did state that Whitetail was entitled to maintain gates in the PUD at 5 different locations. However, that development agreement specifically goes on to state that no gate is permitted at the intersection of Club Hill Boulevard and Migratory Way, this intersection that we're discussing tonight. So it didn't call out any other locations where it was expressly prohibited except for this one. And so that is why it's a request to modify the development agreement, because we'd have to remove the language saying that no gates are permitted here. There's nothing requiring the commission or the city council to approve a development agreement amendment. It was an agreement that we all signed into, and so it's completely discretionary. They go on to state their reasons for wanting to move the gate being at the outside of the subdivision versus internal, keeping people from moving internally. They talk about how that prohibition at the time was likely due to the Kings Pines Estates HOA, and due to some of these agreements that they discussed, such as safety improvements, alternate routes, allowing Kings Pines people to use the pathways in Whitetail that the HOA has agreed to support the amendment. I think what's important here is for the commission to think about whether they want to modify the development agreement or not, because it's not something that we are required to do. It's not like this application is meeting certain code sections and therefore, it's directly permitted. It is discretionary. Code does talk about, well, code was changed since that time. At that time, when this development agreement was originally approved, gated communities were allowed. Immediately after that, the code was changed to not approve gated communities. That's not the character intent for McCall. So while the number of gates would not be changing, the number of gates seen by the public would be increasing. So I think it's just something for the commission and then the city council to think about, their vision and what the intent was there for McCall. There's a few code sections that were cited, and Amy discussed them as well. When non-conforming structures are moved for any reason over any distance, it shall conform to the regulations of the zone to which it is moved, and that we no longer permit gated communities. There's very few agency comments. We did receive quite a few public comments. It looks like we sent out 7 public comments in the initial distribution. I think that I have one on the screen that I was going to read. And then I sent out one more this afternoon that was a letter of support. And then I have one on the screen that people did not receive because it came in late. And because I read the other one earlier tonight, I will read this. Dear Mr. Bisa, I am the owner of the property at 643 Lichen Lane in McCall. Our home was only 30 seconds driving from the present gateless entry into Whitetail and less than 3 minutes driving from State Highway 55. The existing entry system into Whitetail does not deter unauthorized entrance into Whitetail. A controlled access gate as proposed in the relocation plan would make our Whitetail home safer and more secure in our opinion. We wholeheartedly support the gate relocation. Thank you. I would just point out that the majority of, well, I think all the comments were in support, the majority of them being from people in Whitetail who want to live within the gated community and support putting the gate up. And then the remainder being for Kings Pines. So I think you've seen all the public comments, all 9.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Morgan or Amy before we open public hearing? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. As was stated, we have received a number of written comments via email that we have reviewed. So if anyone would like to speak this evening, you are welcome to do so at this point. If you are on a phone line, you need to unmute yourself. So hit *6 and then wait just a little bit and you'll come online. So I'll allow a little time for public comment.
All right, good evening. My name is Steve Clements. I am the current president of Kings Pines 1 Estates. Oops, I forgot to state my address. I'm at 1430 Club Hill Boulevard. I'm within the 300-foot notification area for this request. I've served as the HOA president of Kings Pines 1 Estates since 2008. And with regard to this application and why we are so in support of it is I feel it's right-siding something that was missed in 2005 that we as a HOA were directly responsible for, with this gate not being where it should be. When we purchased our home in 2004, we were aware that this property was in play. I wasn't on the board of Kings Pines 1 then. The board then was adamantly opposed to the whitetail development accessing Club Hill Boulevard with migratory. And with that in mind, they chose to oppose the entire development proposal for phase 2, which somewhat backfired because there were myself and a gentleman named Steve Morandi who were most impacted by this because of the proximity of our homes to this intersection, that pleaded sanity, if you will, to let's look at this from a perspective of having conditions of approval that would to the benefit of both neighborhoods. Having some development experience myself, I knew darn well that with 220 feet of county easement, this would be approved. And for some reason, we were not successful in convincing our HOA board not to go down the path of taking on Mr. Manchester, which didn't work out so well for us. Ironically, here we are today, and all of what we asked for, or Steve Morandi and I were asking for back in 2005, is common sense